Welcome to Classic Trials. If you're new here, my name is Alita. I'm a lawyer licensed in California and DC, and on this channel, we make sense of the law one bite at a time. In this series, we observe and analyze the play-by-play of some of the biggest trials that have shaped the public consciousness of the American judicial system. In this season, we're working our way through the case of California v. Erik and Lyle Menendez. Growing up in Princeton, New Jersey, and then Beverly Hills, California, these young men had everything they could ever want, or so it seemed, until one night on August 20th, 1989, they approached Jose and Kitty Menendez with newly purchased shotguns. Put on trial for murdering their own parents, they claimed self-defense, arguing they were terrorized in their own home by abusive parents until they could take no more. Which argument is more convincing? Come join and see for yourself. All right. Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are coming in from. I hope that you're having a wonderful Monday. It is officially October, which means we can start with some more Halloweenness. As you could tell by my sweater and by Indy's bandana, of course. And you can't really see it right now. Maybe you'll be able to see a little bit better in a second. Give me 1 second. Maybe. Wait, is that... Did it do it? Wait. Did it work? Oh, I guess it did. You can't really tell. And then that one. Yes, I have floating candles in my office because reasons. Because it's October. I'm so excited for Halloween and for the holidays in general. So we're just getting into it. We're getting all into it. Holmes is very much loving these hanging candles, by the way, because they're right there. They're hanging candles. So anyway, so we'll see if he decides to get up to some of his own mischief. But yeah, anyway, so that is that. And also I did see it in the chat just now. Somebody mentioned it. Happy Mean Girls Eve, because tomorrow is Mean Girls Day. Yes, of course, October 3rd. I don't know if anybody in the chat has a plan for how they will be celebrating the day. I'm going to be wearing pink for sure. Unfortunately, it's not a Wednesday this year, but it's a Tuesday. But definitely will be wearing pink, and probably will be quoting Mean Girls all day. So anyway, yeah, I hope you guys are having a good one. Yes, we got it's October 3rd, almost. And tomorrow's October 3rd. Yes, you guys get it. You get it. So, alrighty, Indy, what are you doing? You're on the floor. You're everybody wants to see you. It's okay. I'll let you stay there for a bit. Anyhow, so okay, all right. So today we've got another Menendez Monday. It's another Menendez Monday. We've got more testimony from Lyle. We're still in Lyle Menendez land. So, this is all going to be cross-examination. I mean, I don't know how much longer he's going to be on cross-examination, but it seems like it's just going to be a while. So today is going to be bit of a I don't know. It's gonna be a normal day, but it's gonna be all cross-examination. What is this? Alita, dude, wear your non-consecutive days of the week tank top or once a week ponytail. I mean, I might go for my once a week ponytail. I might do that. I might do that tomorrow. We shall see. Anyhow, okay. Anything else to say about any of that? I think that's about it. Okay. All right. Let's get into it, shall we? Let's jump right into the testimony today. We've been in cross-examination of Lyle for a little bit. We have, it's a long one, and understandably so, because his testimony is very long. This entire trial is very long. We've been looking at it for almost a year now. Of course, we're doing it once a week, and it's like installments of 3 or 4 hours. And but so we're it takes a long time, but understandably this cross-examination is going to be long. But I mean, I'm wondering what you guys think about the effectiveness of the cross-examination so far, because sometimes when you have a very long cross-examination, you start to lose focus, right? I am always a fan of the keep it short, keep it punchy, lead the witness on as tightly as possible, and have them be telling your narrative. How well do you think that's been happening in this cross-examination with Lyle? To me, it doesn't feel like it's really hitting too much for me. It hasn't really changed my opinion one way or another on this entire case. It feels at this point like everything's kind of baked in, which is not good for the prosecution. And it kind of feels like this is like the defense's case to lose. Now, at this point, they're still trying to get a full acquittal for the brothers. I don't necessarily know that they have shown that they should be entirely acquitted. Imperfect self-defense seems like an appropriate remedy in my opinion. But I know that opinions entirely vary on this case. People have very different opinions on this case based on all kinds of things. Different aspects of this case strike people in very different ways. So, anyway, okay, let's get to it. But first, this is so generous. RW, thank you so much for this very generous super chat. Morning, first live. I watched this trial in my early 20s. I can't wait to watch it again with you. Also, I hope you do the Jodi Arias trial at some point. Her victim was my sister's neighbor. Dying to hear your thoughts on jury asking questions. Oh, that is interesting. Yeah, Jodi Arias case is one of those that we are thinking about. I know that there is a lot. There's a lot that is not PG rated, right? In that case, but none of these cases are, right? We're talking about murder in most of these, and this one has a hell of a lot of other horrifying things that happened before even the murders, the alleged murders, right? The acts that they are on trial for murder for. I am not saying that it's murder, but that's that case. I know that there's a lot of craziness in the Jodi Arias case too, but that is one of those that we are definitely looking at. A lot of people are very interested in. So it might, I can't make any promises at this point, but it might be the next one. I don't know. We'll see. But, that's crazy that you have a personal connection to it. And I'm very sorry for your sister's loss, or your loss. I don't know if you knew that person, particularly well or not, but that's wild. So anyway, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you so much for the very generous super chat. So kind of you. Okay. Let's dive into the actual testimony. Yes. Okay. Nothing else. All right. And also, I probably don't say this enough these days, but if you guys are watching and you're enjoying it, please do like the video, because it definitely does help with the whole YouTube algorithm to get that engagement. I always appreciate the folks that are in the chat. I always appreciate the folks that are on replay, and that are commenting and all that kind of stuff. And then also just the lurkers, folks that are just watching and not necessarily, talking with others in the chat or anything like that. But if you could help with that like button, that would be a huge, huge help. So, okay. Let's get into it.
Right.
And why did you do that?
Because Friday, when I was in the store, I had just bought the ammunition. I'd never asked the lady, or it was just there. And I knew it was shotgun ammunition, but that's all I knew. And I just bought it. I didn't really think about it.
Okay. Sorry. Just for anyone, this is definitely, we're just jumping right back into the cross-examination here. And I started from the very beginning. They're going into how he chose the ammunition that he chose for the shotguns that they ended up using to kill their parents. So just for anybody that's like, what is happening here? What are they talking about? That is what they're talking about. They're in this moment where he's deciding which ammunition to use, because, they've talked about the different types of pellets, that seems to point somehow to their, the prosecution's element of malice aforethought that they have to show, in order for it to be murder. So it seems like that's where that's supposed to fit in. To me, that decision seems like it could be entirely arbitrary, especially if these are guys that don't know anything about any kind of firearms, really. So yeah. And also, Draco Amy, thank you so much for the trigger warning. If you need, step away for a while or catch the next stream. Look after yourself. There's a lot of sensitive stuff that we get into in this stream. So, if anybody has a hard time, it is absolutely not worth your mental health. All kinds of sensitive stuff that we get into. And also, Christian Williams, thank you so much for gifting one Legal Blitz membership. That is so kind of you. Jenny Harris, you have now been gifted a membership by Christian Williams. So welcome to Bite Club, and or welcome back. I can't remember if you were in at some point before. If not, welcome. And if you have been, welcome back. So I hope that you can join us on Friday for our members only live stream. Super casual, and we just chat with the chat on about all kinds of stuff. So, alrighty. And okay, got it. Okay, let's continue on. Sorry for all the interruptions, and we're just kind of bouncing around. And for those of you, don't worry, Indy will be back. She's still in the studio. She's right here. She's just on the floor, just stretched out a little more. I probably should get a bigger, like a love seat or something for her. That would be more comfortable, because then she would also be like her typical Indy with like feet in the air that she likes to sleep like. Anyway. Okay. All right. Let's get into it. I'm a little bit brain bouncy in various directions right now. I apologize. Let's focus and get back to the testimony. Sorry.
I didn't load it in the gun, and sometime that evening or on the trip, I started thinking that maybe this ammunition didn't work with this particular gun, and that there might be some difference. So I just decided the next day to go to a store and ask somebody there what they recommended.
How many boxes of ammunition did you buy on Friday, August the 18th?
I believe one or two, but I think one.
And do you remember how many rounds of ammunition were contained in that one box?
I don't remember. They were these square, like yellow and blue boxes, and the shells were sort of lined up. Might have been 16 or 12 or something like that.
What happened to the box of ammunition after you killed your parents?
The box of that ammunition, they were all in the car.
And that's your brother's car?
Right.
Were they discarded?
I discarded them and everything. They were sort of all over because I had been getting shells out, and they were sort of mixed up. But I discarded everything that I saw at the gas station, and then some of the stuff was still in there, and I discarded the next day, Monday.
Now, you heard the coroner testify, did you not, that there was birdshot and buckshot recovered from the bodies of your parents. Do you remember that testimony,
right.
Sir?
Yes.
Did you buy birdshot or buckshot when you bought the first box in San Diego, if you know?
Well, I didn't know the difference at the time, but I guess it's birdshot in San Diego.
Why do you say that?
Well, just from what the coroner said, that he said that almost all the shots were buckshot, and I had changed the ammunition, so I knew that it would have to be all buckshot. So it had to be the new ammunition.
So the new ammunition was the buckshot, is that
right.
correct?
Correct.
Okay, but you didn't know on Saturday, the 19th of August, that the ammunition you'd purchased the day before was birdshot and therefore not as lethal. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. So when you went to this gun shop, and where was the gun shop you went to on Saturday, August the 19th?
Somewhere in Van Nuys, I believe, off Sepulveda somewhere.
Near here?
Yes.
And when you went to that particular shop, was it a sporting goods store? Was it a gun shop? What kind of store was it?
No, it was if I remember, it was a very small store. Just a real tiny square store, and there was a counter. And then there was a bunch of ammunition lined up on one wall, and then he had lots of guns in there, and there were some people in there looking around and buying things, asking questions, I guess. And at some point I got the gentleman's attention, and then we had this, or he had a long discussion with me about ammunitions and different types of ammunitions, and was pretty forceful and knew a lot about it, obviously, and just basically took a box off the shelf and said, "This is what you want." So that's what I bought.
Did you describe to him the kind of gun that you had, or did you bring it with you?
No, I didn't have to get that far, because he said that the sense I got from the conversation was it didn't matter. But I may have described the gun in some way, but I don't think I got technical. I certainly, didn't give him any particulars. What I learned, I believe, was just that this was the ammunition I needed. And that was the only thing that stayed in my mind. And I bought that, and I had intended to just use that ammunition in the gun and reload the gun. I just had not done it Sunday.
Well, did you take an example or one of the...
No, I never brought the ammunition into the store.
Well, how did you know what gauge to get?
I didn't. I just bought shotgun ammunition that was stacked up. They had it like in a pyramid stack.
Was that at the Big Five that it was in the pyramid?
Right.
Okay, now when you went to see this man in Van Nuys, you told him that you were unsure about the ammunition you'd already purchased, or what did you say to him about what you'd already purchased?
I don't remember exactly, but I told him that I had bought shotguns, and he may have asked what kind or something, and I may have given him some description. I don't remember exactly. And then he was going into a discussion about what would be the kind of ammunition you buy for home protection and so on. And it was really a long discussion. He had a lot of information, and I didn't absorb all of it. Basically, I was just there to find out what I should have, and he basically just picked it out for me. So I bought it.
And is your testimony then that the majority of the shots fired were from this ammunition that you purchased on Saturday, correct?
Right.
And that therefore, from the coroner's testimony, that must have been buckshot that you purchased on Saturday, correct?
Yes.
And I believe you indicated something about home security. Did you tell this gentleman that you needed the ammunition to shoot at people or birds or ducks or any kind of other hunting?
No.
Does anyone know what pattern that is? I am distracted by it a little bit. I feel like it's like the planets maybe or something. Like I'm getting like a galaxy planets kind of vibe from it. I don't dislike it. I'm just wondering what it is. Anyway, sorry. Let's continue.
No, it was just I'm sure he asked. Again, I don't remember the conversation exactly, but I believe I just told him the same thing that I told all the other people, that whenever she talked about what gun or whatever, just that I needed it for protection. And I think they just assumed it was home protection in case there was a burglar or something of that sort.
How did you pick out this particular gun shop?
My brother found it out of the phone book.
Was your brother with you when you did this?
Yes.
Was he inside of the store with you?
Yes, I believe so.
And how did you get there?
We drove.
Whose car?
Erik's.
After you acquired this new ammunition, how many boxes did you buy of it?
1 or 2 boxes. Again, I don't know why I can't remember, but more than likely I bought 2 boxes, but I really don't remember.
And you paid for it with cash, is that correct?
Yes.
You did not use your father's American Express credit card for this transaction, correct?
No.
And you did not use your father's American Express credit card to purchase the shotguns the day before, correct?
No.
I mean, it would seem like if they're worried about their parents, like if they're worried about triggering their parents into violence, this would be one way to, trigger them, is by buying shotguns and their parents seeing that on the transaction. if they get some kind of an alert, come on. Like it makes sense to me. It makes sense to me. I get what she's trying to say is like, oh, like this is all planned out. This is all, you're buying these shotguns ahead of time. You're thinking about the fact that you want to use cash. You don't want to use, but like the fact that they use cash, it also helps the defense. So focusing really hard on this point to me is it's time that's not as efficiently directed as it could be, if that makes sense.
There was a reason.
Oh, and also, sorry, there was a question in the chat about Judge Weisberg, like flipping through a book. I don't know what book it is. I didn't catch that. It could be Rules of Evidence. It could be, I don't know, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. I don't know. But he sometimes looks like he is really not paying attention in this case, but I would venture to guess that he's most definitely paying attention, especially given that there are cameras in the courtroom and all kinds of reporters. There's all kinds of media attention. Any judge is not going to be not paying attention to a trial that is definitely being, like broadcast all over the country. And especially since this is one of the earliest ones to be broadcast across the country, right? Like this is like, it's kind of an uncharted territory in terms of like trials and all of that kind of stuff. Okay. Let's continue.
Reason that you didn't use a credit card, correct?
Right.
You didn't want any trail to lead to the purchase of these weapons and the ammunition, correct?
No, he was buying them with Donovan Goodrow's license. It was going to be hard to put Joseph Menendez's credit card down and pay for it. So, I mean,
good answer for the defense.
That couldn't happen.
Okay, so you couldn't have been Joseph Menendez with your brother being Donovan Goodrow, correct?
I could have been, but there just wasn't any need. We had lots of cash, and we just thought we'd buy it with cash.
That's a decent answer, that he was like, there is a way for these to eventually lead back to us because we had Donovan Goodrow's, license, or his driver's license, and that, he was my friend. Like there is a connection there, but it seems like maybe even a little bit more of what I would have if I'm his defense attorney. I would want to know, like, I would want him to say something along the lines of like, we knew that there was a possibility that if we bought it with Dad's credit card, that Dad could get triggered by it and then realize that he needs to kill us. So there are, like I said, it flips both ways in my opinion.
So you didn't think about the fact that there might be a trail leading back to you if you'd used your father's credit card, correct?
No.
But when you used the U.S. Sprint card on Sunday night to make the phone call to Perry Berman, you wanted there to be a paper trail, didn't you?
No. No, I didn't. And in fact, I have a memory of I remember telling the police that I'd made these calls at the Civic Center, and I have a memory that they checked and did not find records, and that I was told that, and my answer was, I made the calls. And I just didn't click in my mind that I had made them on the Sprint card, and therefore they wouldn't show up. I just assumed they would show up, I guess, and I don't know why they couldn't find them. And I remember this, and I actually remember at some point my attorneys telling me that they could not find the records and so on, and I really didn't have any answer for that. And then eventually, after searching, found it on the Sprint records. There was no particular reason.
But you had cash enough to buy the ammunition on the 19th, correct?
Right.
You had cash to buy the guns on the 18th, correct?
Right.
And you had no cash to put into a payphone to make a phone call from Santa Monica to West Hollywood, where Perry Berman lived, correct?
Well, I would need dimes. I mean, I don't know if I had any on me. I really was just totally in the habit of using Sprint credit cards. And I guess I don't know if that sounds strange or not, but that's just what I always did. And certainly when I didn't tell the police when they asked, or if they did, hey, check the Sprint cards, you'll see, or something like that. I mean,
but that would have looked very prepared, too, if you volunteered to the police that it was your father's business that was the cause of this homicide, and that you had a U.S. Sprint record, which would prove that you were at the Santa Monica at 11:07, and had given them other details like that. That would have looked pretty prepared, wouldn't it?
Honestly, I just used a Sprint card because I just used Sprint cards. If I would have had 2 dimes, I'd just as easily put 2 dimes in the phone.
Now, I believe you indicated then that you wanted to have a different kind of ammunition. For what reason? You wanted to make sure you had the right ammunition? Is that correct?
I just wasn't, no, I wanted to make sure, yeah, as far as whether it would work, yes.
The correct ammunition for what purpose?
So that if I had to fire the gun, it would fire.
And that when you fired the gun, it would cause damage?
Well, I assumed if I had ammunition in there, it would cause damage either way. But my main concern was that I would fire something and it was just not the right shell for that gun, and it just would misfire or something would happen of that sort. So I just figured I'd just go back the next day and get whatever ammunition was supposed to get.
Did you ever practice using the shotgun before Sunday night?
No.
You never went off into someplace in Los Angeles County and shot the gun to see if it worked?
No.
Now, I believe you indicated then that you wanted to have the correct ammunition. So after you went, what time was it that you went to Van Nuys and talked to this man and got the boxes of ammunition?
Somewhere between around between 12, 1 and around 12, 1 or 2 o'clock, somewhere in there.
And then you went back to your home, is that correct?
Well, we drove around until I felt we were late enough that we could go home without it being suspicious and us needing a big explanation.
Okay, so would it be your testimony then that you didn't have time once you got home to reload the shotguns before you had to go on this fishing trip? Is that correct?
Right, I didn't have time because I drove in and it was just like my mom had everything ready and we ended up leaving within a few minutes.
And you really didn't want to go on this fishing trip, correct?
Right.
So you told your mother that you were sick and that you couldn't go on the trip, right?
No.
Well, Mr. Menendez, when you were a student, did you ever say that you were sick so you could get out of doing things?
Yes.
So you knew how to do that, right?
Yeah, I could do that with a teacher for some reason. I don't remember any specific instance, but I'm sure I did it. But I don't think you could do that with my dad. And not this weekend. This isn't a weekend like every other time. This isn't like school or something. You know, this was like a crisis thing. Everybody was very nervous. All 4 of us, I'm sure. Certainly my brother and I. And I don't think that something strange like that would my dad would go, "Oh, okay, you're sick, you can stay home." I would not have done that.
So this is good for the defense, that this is something that he needs to emphasize, is how different and how strange that weekend was, how it was tensions were particularly high, how despite the ways that they would do things before, this brought everything up to 11, right? We're in this is Spinal Tap now. That this goes up to 11. This is an important point for him to emphasize. And so it's good for the defense's case that he is, that he's making that point to say, look, this is not like any other normal weekend. That's important to emphasize. Also, oh my goodness, Christian Williams, thank you for gifting another Legal Bites membership. Dalabar, you've been gifted a membership by Christian Williams. Welcome to Bite Club, or welcome back to Bite Club. And Christian Williams, thank you again. Two today. That's so kind of you. And Mountain Princess 207 also gifted a Legal Bites membership. TM was gifted a membership by Mountain Princess 207. So thank you so much. Mountain Princess 207, also very kind and generous of you. And TM, welcome to Bite Club. So, Mountain Princess 207, member for 10 months. Is this a thing we're doing? A membership train? If you guys so choose. I love to see those, obviously, because those are like the best kind of like, super chats or super thanks, right? Because it's pulling people into the membership so that they can join in and share the membership emojis and all that kind of stuff. But I love to see it. So thank you guys. Thank you once again.
So you immediately went from the driveway of your parents' home to their car to the fishing trip. Is that correct?
Yeah, we don't have a driveway. It's just there's like the front door, the cars, a gate, and the street.
Well, there's a driveway into where the cars are parked, correct?
Not really, I don't believe so. I mean, it's the sidewalk, the gate, and then the carport.
All right. So you immediately went from the carport, where you were with your brother and his escort,
Right.
into your parents' car without going back inside the house. Is that correct?
No, I think we were able to walk inside the house, and I remember my mother, I believe, coming out and meeting us. I saw my mother first, and then it seemed like everything was ready. They had some bags they wanted to take, and I just sort of got caught in the, I remember just feeling like, I don't know if I really want to go, and what should I do here? And my brother looking sort of to me for support and what should we do, and just getting caught up and going. Next thing I know, I was having a discussion about whether we could take 2 cars, and I lost that discussion, and I was driving to the boat trip.
The bags that you just mentioned, did these bags look like they were big enough to hold rifles?
They were just duffel bags, whatever.
Were you frightened of the bags?
No.
Well, you indicated that you were very frightened of this trip. Okay, what did you think was going to happen on the trip to you?
I thought that they had arranged to kill us on this trip in a way that would be, nobody would be around for sure.
So that they could tell their friends that they'd gone fishing with you on a boat, and the 4 of you had left together, and only 2 people had come back, and they don't know what happened to you. Is that what you thought your parents were going to say to their friends and family after you failed to come back from the trip?
No, I'm sure they wouldn't say that. They could say any of a number of things, but I'm sure it wouldn't be too hard to make an excuse or just say they went and we were home and they got back and we had run away or something.
You'd run away on the boat?
Well, obviously they would not have told people we went on the boat with them. If they mentioned that they went at all, they would not have said we went on the boat.
Did your father's secretary make any of the arrangements for this fishing trip?
I had no idea. I was told by my parents earlier, and then I was talked to my mom Friday, and that's all I knew. Although I knew that it was supposed to be for a business reason.
Now, when you came home from the fishing trip, you still had the ammunition in Erik's car then, is that correct?
Yeah.
And was that the same car that you took to UCLA to speak to your brother?
Yes.
And then when you came home, you immediately reloaded your weapon with your new ammunition, correct?
No, we got home quite confused over what had happened on the trip and basically immediately left and went to UCLA.
Right, and when you came home from UCLA, you had access then at that time to go back into your guest house and get your gun and load it with the new ammunition, right?
Yes, but the door was locked and my brother couldn't get in and all the doors were locked, so I rang the doorbell and my mother came down.
And then after your mother came down, ultimately you got into the guest house, correct?
Well, eventually, after I had the argument with my mother, my brother and I talked again, and then I eventually went to the guest house. But, all these things were taking place. The trip, the thing that my mother said, going to UCLA, I just didn't think about it. I was just in the guest house. I didn't think about it.
But you were in fear for your life from Thursday night through Sunday night. And you said it kept getting worse, correct?
Yes, it kept getting worse.
Okay, so why didn't you just at that time reload your weapon?
Because I wasn't thinking clearly. I was afraid, and it was getting worse, and there were lots of things happening, and I just wasn't thinking that organized.
I believe you indicated that during the day on the 20th, on Sunday the 20th of August, that a couple of things happened which increased your fear level. Is that correct?
Right.
One of them was that your father had lied to Perry Berman about you being away from the house. And you took that to be very ominous, correct?
I did.
And when you found that out, you were in the guest house, correct?
No.
Didn't Perry Berman tell you over the phone that your father had indicated that you were away at the Beverly Center?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember where I was. Yeah, I guess I was in the guest house. Yeah.
I believe you indicated you only went into the house one time that day, and that was during this attempt to get your parents to speak to you, correct?
Yeah, that's right. I think I went in the one time. I don't know. I mean, I think I probably went into the kitchen area for food and stuff, so I may have gone in again.
Are you having trouble remembering the events of that afternoon, August the 20th?
Yes.
This is a very important occasion in your life, isn't it?
It's a very bad one, yes.
Okay, and you've had a considerable amount of time to think about what happened, haven't you?
Yes.
And you're now saying that you might have gone back into the house for another reason, that is to go to the kitchen. Is that correct?
I'm sure I went to the kitchen to get food at some point. I have memories of the things that made me more afraid, or the things that happened that just stick in my memory as important for some reason, but not every conversation, every movement, everything I did, and certainly not how the thoughts were going through my head is not easy to remember. So sometimes I try to think back and say, well, I do remember eating at some point. I just don't remember it very well.
Is it a question of remembering it, Mr. Menendez, or is it a question of creating?
I don't want to create, so that's why sometimes I just don't remember. So I just say I don't remember. And if I remember vaguely, then I remember vaguely, and I try my best.
So,
I mean, look, memory is always at issue, right? Memory, perception, these are things that with every single witness, I mean, you have to evaluate, right? If you're on the jury, you have to evaluate these things. And obviously what she's getting at is he has every reason to lie. He has every reason to shift his memories around. He has every, conveniently, all of these things. But I don't really see that being a thing here, because he has admitted to things that are terrible on the stand. For example, he admitted to essaying his own brother at one point. And based on the reaction of Erik in the courtroom when Lyle was testifying about that, and he admitted to that and he apologized to his brother on the stand, that was very real. So he has admitted to some things that are very, very damaging. So, is that strategic? Could it be strategic? Sure, it could be. I don't get the impression that it's strategic, because he seems, when he said that he doesn't exactly remember some things, he seems to me, anyway, this is my own impression. I'm one person. If I'm on the jury, I'm one of 12, right? I'm not deciding this case based on my opinion. Realistically, I'm not on the jury anyway, because I'm a lawyer and they never want lawyers on the jury. And least of all, ones that for a living watch and comment on trials and explain them to people. But anyway, all of that aside, that's my impression of him is he seems to be remembering things when he can remember them, and not remembering things when he can't remember them. And he doesn't seem to be conveniently fabricating anything. I don't have anything here that makes me feel like, like a lot of times when a witness starts to get pushed by the other side, you can kind of feel them squirm a little bit. We've seen that in some other trials. We've seen that. We saw that in Depp v. Heard. We saw that in spades, right? With Amber Heard. Then in the Gwyneth Paltrow trial, there was the witness that was the friend of the plaintiff, who turns out is colorblind and can't see the color that Gwyneth Paltrow was wearing that day. Issues of perception, issues of, and it's like on cross-examination, the impression of him was, oh, he seems a little bendy with the facts. He seems like he's been bending them a little bit in favor of his friend who was the plaintiff. And that's understandable, because, maybe a feeling of loyalty, maybe a feeling of pity for the guy, all kinds of reasons why that can be the case. But when we're adjudicating a case, we need the actual truth, not the bent truth. So we've seen what that looks like when someone is getting a little bit bendy with the facts. Is he being intentionally vague here? That is obviously up to interpretation. This is we're humans reading humans. This is what we're here for. Or is there a reasonable explanation for it? Is it the fact that he was exhausted, wasn't sleeping, it was traumatized? Trauma can impact memory too. Like this is one of the things that I talk about all the time, which is that when you go through something, people think that as time goes on, your memory is going to be like maybe clearer or better because you've had a chance to like reinforce that memory, but the inverse is correct. The more time passes, the more your memory fades, the more you're likely to forget things, or maybe fill a certain vacancy, fill a certain blind spot with fill a certain blind spot with another memory, or with a memory that doesn't actually exist, didn't actually happen. And where there is trauma involved, that memory gets even more skewed, or the likelihood of that getting more skewed is higher. That's just, there's a ton of science to back that up. So, okay. All right. Anyway, let's continue on. But it's, I wanted to jump in on that because it's like, in my opinion, there are a number of reasons why he could be vague about it. Maybe it's intentional. Maybe you're reading it that way. Maybe that's the impression that you have. You were entirely justified in having that impression, because that's why we have 12 people on a jury. Okay. All right. Let's continue.
So in addition to your father saying something to you about tennis camp, which made you very upset, and Mr. Berman's telling you that your father had lied about you being at the Beverly Center.
Right.
Okay. Those are the two things that happened before 9:45 that night that made you believe that your life was more in danger than ever, correct?
No. There was what my brother told me in the morning when he woke me up. And then it goes all the way back. There was my mom's statement. It was just the feeling of the weekend and what had happened Thursday. I mean, it wasn't any particular thing. Like you said, it was just growing in me. And I was thinking, I think, less and less clearly.
Well, in the morning when your brother came to you between 7 and 9 a.m. and told you about this horrible thing that had happened the night before, why didn't you then reload this weapon?
I didn't think about it, ma'am. It was in the car, and it just wasn't something that I was thinking clearly about. And until I actually needed the gun, suddenly it didn't come into my mind.
So then I believe you indicated that at approximately 9:45 that night, your brother returned home. And the last time you had seen him before that was at noon, correct?
Right.
And so to your knowledge, he was away from the house for approximately 9 hours and 45 minutes?
Correct.
And I believe that you first noticed that your brother had returned. Was that before or after your mother had told you that you couldn't go to the movies?
Before, right before.
Your brother came home right before then, is that correct?
Right.
And where was this conversation with your mother? Was it in the foyer?
She was standing in the doorway and between the den and the foyer, and I was standing facing her in the foyer.
I believe you indicated after she informed you that you couldn't go to the movies, and your father and mother went into the den and closed the doors. It was then that you decided that death was near. Is that correct?
More than near, I thought that we were going to die, and it was going to happen.
When your father closed the doors to the den, did he tell you, tonight you die?
No, he never said that.
Did he say anything to you threatening at all before he closed the doors?
Well, I took everything that was happening to be extremely threatening, but he never said what you just said. It wasn't you're going to die tonight or anything like that.
Was this the first time in your life that your father had ever closed a door so that he could have a private conversation with someone?
No.
That's for speculation.
Mm.
All right, overall. Natural step.
No, it isn't. This weekend is very different than other weekends in my life and other door closings. It meant something to me when he did it that night.
But there was nothing obvious about what he had done. In other words, he didn't threaten you. He didn't have a weapon. He didn't do anything out of the ordinary, correct?
Well, yes, he closed the doors, and they were open all day, and they're normally open, and for some reason, he closed them to shut himself off, and so I wouldn't see whatever was going on in the room.
Did you think perhaps he wanted to have a private conversation with your mother?
No, I didn't.
Had he ever had a private conversation with your mother? Had you ever seen your mother and father go into a room before and close the door during the 21 years before you killed your parents?
Probably.
But on this particular night, that act of closing the door was the last straw. Is that correct?
It wasn't the last straw. It was the last thing I remember before I panicked.
But between the time of the door closing and the time of you starting to shoot, you had no other contact with your parents. Is that correct?
Right.
And you made no attempt to look through the French doors or the door from the kitchen or any other windows into that room to see what your parents were doing in there, correct? You made no
Right.
attempt.
Right.
Now, I think you indicated yesterday that when you went into that room with your shotgun, you thought your parents were out looking for you, correct?
Well, I said that I didn't know what they were doing, and I figured that they were going to come looking for us, yes. I mean, in that sense, yes. But they might be in the kitchen, they might have walked out the back. We really didn't know exactly because there had been some period of time that went by while I was running. So we couldn't be sure.
So you sent your brother to the kitchen with his weapon. You stood at the French doors into the room in order to trap them inside the room, correct?
No.
You went into that room and started firing your weapon before you even knew what your parents were doing, didn't you?
Yes, we were in a panic.
Your Honor, I have here a photograph. I'd like to mark it as Exhibit 250, please. Mr. Menendez, I believe you indicated yesterday when we were discussing Exhibit 20 up here that the coffee table was not in the position that is demonstrated in other words, when you went into the room, the coffee table was not at an angle to the sofa, but was rather parallel to the sofa. Would that be correct?
That's the way I remember it, yeah.
Okay, and that's how your parents normally kept the coffee table. That is parallel to the sofa.
Right.
Okay. And you've seen the photographs of the crime scene, correct?
Not really, other than when they were on the board, but I was trying not to see them.
Well, in the photographs, the coffee table appears to be similar to the diagram People's 20. That is, that it's at an angle, as if it's been moved, correct?
Yes, I noticed that, and I had assumed that the people that went in the room moved them.
I'm going to object. I do not believe that the position of the table is the same as in the photographs. I think it mistakes the evidence.
Okay, I'll rephrase the question.
All right.
That the photographs reflect that the table is not parallel to this part of the sofa where your father was seated, but is at an angle.
I'm going to object to that because that misstates the bulk of the crime scene photographs.
Okay, Your Honor, may I have a moment, please, then?
Certainly.
May we approach to be heard on this issue, Your Honor?
Well, let the prosecution find the photographs that they're looking for first. All right.
Your Honor, I have here another photograph which I've shown to counsel. I'd like to take mark as Exhibit 251, please.
Yes.
Please.
So this is an interesting point right here. What they're fighting over is the diagram that they're showing of the living room with the seat, you know, the couch that's like the L-shaped couch kind of, and then a table right by it. And you know, there's this fight over the position of the table in the living room. And I think that what she's trying to get at is that the position of the table was such that, you know, Jose couldn't have like lunged at Lyle or something like that, that it was like between them in some way, which points to there being less of a threat on Lyle's life, potentially. That's what I think she's getting at. But now the issue here is, was that diagram properly drawn to be what's the word for it? Was that properly drawn so that it actually accurately depicts the way that the living room was on that night as it's depicted in the photographs that were taken of the crime scene? Defense was saying, no, it wasn't. It's not an accurate representation. So then they kind of had this back and forth over it. And that's what that was about just now. So now it seems like the prosecution is providing photographs to Judge Weisberg and saying, look, this is the position that it was in. It is accurate. Also, Christian Williams, thank you for gifting one more Legal Bites membership. Thank you so much. So kind of you. You you keep gifting out memberships today. I love it. And Bronwyn W., you have been gifted a membership by Christian Williams. So welcome back to Bite Club. I hope to see you on Friday. Okay. And also, I think now that since I'm paused, a couple questions here. Cat A, wow, he talks with his hands a lot. Is that something that's encouraged or discouraged during witness prep for the stand? Usually, what I have told witnesses, either before deposition, especially if it's filmed, or before any kind of testimony that they give in a courtroom, what I tell them is just be natural. Just try to be natural. It's an uncomfortable place to be. So, try to get yourself as comfortable as you can be. If someone naturally gestures with a lot of, I feel it now. I feel hyper conscious of the fact that I'm doing it, but like sometimes people will gesture a lot with their hands, and it's just kind of the way that they talk. If you try to tell them don't do that, sometimes it'll make them look more stiff and wooden and uncomfortable, and that can give a different kind of vibe to the jury. And you just want them to be as comfortable and natural as possible. So if they're big, if they're let's say very Italian, maybe they talk with their hands a lot. That if it's natural and it's it's done in a way that they usually do, I would say just go for it. Also, random thought, I feel like Pam would have been more effective as a prosecutor by focusing on her theory of what kind of killing she believed it was than whether or not his abuse was real or fake. I think that would be the case today. I think in 1993, I think that that was a weapon in her arsenal, is to attack the existence of the abuse. Because if she were to just concede that point and say, yes, they were abused, there are all kinds of issues that can come from that, from the perspective of the prosecution. Because number one, that's a high sympathy position for the defense, right? It can potentially muddle things for some people where they feel very emotional about the fact that these kids, well, they're adults now, but as kids they had been abused as children. So there are people out there that would be very emotional about that. I mean, we'll see that, right? Like we see it. We feel, a lot of us feel that ourselves, right? As we're watching this case, that's like, it's such a horrible thing to do. And so that can impact someone. Obviously you can set that aside as well, but not everybody can. And so that would be a concern for the prosecution. For the defense, that's like, whatever, who cares? That's great. That's great for us, because that means it's more likely for them to acquit the brothers. The other issue is, if they were to concede that, that's a point that the defense has to show for the battered, abused defense, right? I want to say battered spouse, right? Battered wife is what it used to be called, battered spouse now, but this is obviously, they're not spouses at all, but they're, it's this defense that is used for people that have been abused and that feel that that's the only way that they can get out. It's an element that the defense has to prove. And so I think from her perspective, it's better to fight them on it and make them prove it, make them put the effort in to prove it. I think today it would probably backfire a bit more on the prosecution, because people are much more aware of the fact that this is something that does happen in this world. And I think that people are very, very sensitive to it. And sensitive, I'm not saying that in a pejorative way. I think sensitive as in people are much more attuned to the fact that this is something that happens. So yeah. So I think today it definitely would be something that would impact her effectiveness as a prosecutor. And they would have to play it in an entirely different way. Anyway, so I just wanted to bring that up. And also, Christian Williams, Another Legal Bites membership. Thank you so much for gifting that. Sophie1518 was gifted a membership by Christian Williams. So welcome to Bite Club, Sophie. And Christian, thank you so much for yet another gifted membership. I love it. You're just sprinkling these through this stream. That's so kind of you. I love it. Okay. All right. Let's continue on, shall we?
I'm showing you a photograph which has been marked as Exhibit 251. I'd like to ask you to look at the coffee table in its relationship to the sofa in this photograph. Do you see the coffee table?
Yes.
Now, in the photograph, does it appear to you that the coffee table is at an angle?
No.
It is not at an angle to the sofa. It's parallel to the sofa. Is that your testimony?
It seems, I guess it could be a slight angle, yeah.
Is this the way the coffee table looked when you went in and killed your parents?
I have no idea.
Is this the way the coffee table looked when you went back in and picked up the shells?
It looks basically like that, I guess, yeah. We really don't remember. It's certainly nowhere near like that picture.
All right,
This is a very slight angle in that picture. And this is,
Referring to a picture or diagram?
this diagram is very badly distorted from that picture.
All right, so it's your testimony then.
So he definitely picked up on the objection by his attorneys, and is pointing out that this diagram is not accurate, even though the judge eventually allowed them to continue on with it and use it in the case and whatnot. He's a very smart guy. He's a smart guy. He's very savvy. He was listening to the objections of the attorneys on the defense. And so he's taking the opportunity to say, look, that diagram's it's no good. It's no good. I don't really remember that much. If, like when I walked in there initially and shot my parents, where the table was, I guess when I was picking up the shells, I guess it was kind of like that, but the pictures in the diagram don't match. Jury doesn't need the witness to say that, because the jury can see that for themselves. They can judge that for themselves. But this is just somebody who has been, this is from, it's interesting to look at from the perspective of just looking at the witness and how well he's been prepared for this and how much he's really paying attention to what's going on in the courtroom. Oh my gosh, RW, thank you so much for yet another generous super chat. So interesting to see this from a different perspective. When I watched this in the 90s, I had already discredited the boys by this point. Made no sense why two grown men couldn't leave. I was their age. Sorry, guys. Mr. Bites is home. Made no sense why two grown men couldn't leave. I was their age and I was on my own. This made no sense to me. That's the perspective of a lot of people. We've talked a lot about how this case would probably have a different result if it were done today, partly because of the fact that at this age, a lot of young adults are either living with their parents or moving back in with their parents. What's the word? Boomerang kids. That's the phrase that the people have used. This is something that kind of happens at this point in someone's life. They may or may not be fully independent. In 1993, I feel like it was much more common for people to actually be on their own at 18 years old, 21 years old. And so I can definitely understand people having that strong feeling at the time that it's unreasonable that they couldn't have just left, right? But looking at the details as we've gone through, it makes sense to me why they couldn't, because they were completely their development in terms of like becoming adults was completely arrested in my opinion. By the fact that like their parents did all their homework. Lyle tried having a job during an interim year in college and working for his dad, and just was completely thrown into a position that he absolutely should not have been in. So I can definitely understand someone of his age being like, I am nothing if I'm not propped up by my dad. I am nothing if I'm not put into a position by my dad and just told to do what he tells me to do. Anyway, that's all an aside, but yeah, it's definitely a different perspective looking at it today than probably looking at it from 1993. But thank you so much, RW, for for the super chat. Very kind, very generous of you. Okay.
And that the angle of the coffee table to the sofa in the photograph 251 is more accurate of what you recall than certainly Exhibit 20. Is that correct?
Definitely.
All right. Now, when you went into that room and you shot your parents, they were eating blueberries and ice cream.
Objection, Your Honor. This states the evidence.
What were they doing?
I'd like to approach on that.
Objection overruled, or objection sustained as to that question since the prosecution has withdrawn it, and the objection is, or the request to approach is denied.
What were they doing? Your parents?
I just remember going in, it's dark, and the really only thing I remember very well is somebody coming toward me on the right, more like a shadow.
And what was the shadow doing to threaten you?
Just, he was coming toward me, but that wasn't so much the thing that he was doing to threaten me. It was that I believed that they were in the process of killing us, and that's why I had run in the room. By that point, I had been sprinting around the house and had come in.
Your father wasn't doing anything to threaten you at the time that you fired the first shot at him, was he?
I felt he was going to kill me.
And what was he doing with his hand?
That was a good answer because she's definitely putting the pressure on him. This is, one of those lessons of like when you are in cross-examination as a witness, if any of you ever find yourselves as a witness in a trial or in a deposition, the opposite side, they might press on you and try to convince you that they know the truth and you are lying, right? That's what she's trying to get him to do is to push him to change his answers. But he's saying, no, I was completely threatened by him. I was threatened by him. And so that consistency is very helpful for him. That point about the blueberries and ice cream though, that was an interesting exchange.
Hands.
Counsel, is there a need for you to be up there?
I'm sorry, I was about to show him a photo, Your Honor. What was he doing with his hand?
Also, if she's going to show another photo, I might take it off the screen because the one that they just showed on there, thankfully it was a bit far away. So, it's a little pixelated. It is the scene as the police found it. So there is some stuff in there that is pretty gory. Another trigger warning for anybody that doesn't like to see violence, blood, that kind of stuff. There may be something like that. I'm going to try to screen the photo before they show it on the screen, before I show it to you guys, just in case. But yeah, just letting you guys know ahead of time.
His hands.
I don't remember. I just remember something coming toward me.
Showing you this photograph 250, it appears to be a photograph of the top of the coffee table.
Okay, maybe
Taken
we'll
at
be
the
okay.
time that the other photographs were taken. Do you recognize the items in photograph 250 on top of the coffee table?
I don't recognize them, but there are things that were in the house on the table, I guess.
Do you recognize
Yeah,
the glasses that are here? There appears to be a glass with liquid. Then there's another glass that appears to have a spoon and some white substance. Do you recognize those as being the glasses that your family used to drink from?
Yes.
And you see there's a Michael Jackson cassette tape here.
Right.
Did your
Ooh, that didn't age well.
family have a Michael Jackson cassette tape?
I'm sure they did.
It looks like a cigarette lighter.
Right.
Your parents smoked.
Right.
Okay, and there appears to be some papers here from UCLA. Do you see those papers here?
Yes.
And your brother was about to go to UCLA, wasn't he?
Yes.
Now, what on this coffee table was threatening to you?
Nothing.
And your father, you couldn't see his hand, so you didn't know what he was doing with his hand when you went into the room, correct?
Right.
What was your mother doing when you went in that room?
Don't remember well, ma'am. Just basically over to the left. I remember there was another person there.
And you assume the other person was your mother since she'd
Yes.
gone into the room with your father, correct?
I didn't know at that point, but I did at some point. I know now it was my mother. At some point, I understood that. Yes.
You weren't sure it was your mother that you were shooting?
I'm not sure exactly what point I realized that the person to the left was my mother.
Did you shoot the person to your left when you first went in before you reloaded?
No.
Who shot that person then?
I don't know. I was just shooting at the person closest to me and coming toward me, and I was sort of firing not well, sort of all over. So it's possible that I shot in that direction, but I don't remember doing that.
So the bit about the ice cream, what she's trying to get at is they were just sitting watching TV, eating ice cream, not doing anything. And that's very helpful to the prosecution because it's like in actuality, maybe they weren't actually a threat to the brothers. But that doesn't help the prosecution on the issue of whether or not Erik and Lyle in the moment that they burst in there, whether they had any sincere belief that their lives were in danger. Parents could have been calmly eating ice cream and blueberries and still calling a hit on their sons. Like just theoretically, right? The likelihood of that, I don't know. That's that we can all judge that independently, right? But theoretically, that could be happening. So the idea that their lives were in danger could still be happening, even if the parents are eating ice cream and, having blueberries on top, which does sound delicious. I'm not going to lie. Okay.
Mr. Menendez, there were only two.
Also, sorry, Christian Williams, thank you so much for gifting another membership. So kind and generous of you. Dater, you've been gifted a membership by Christian Williams. So welcome back to Bike Club. Hope to see you on Friday.
Two shots that went through the French doors, and all the other shots appear to have hit their targets. Did you hear that from the coroner's testimony?
I don't remember it exactly, but
Objection sustained. The answer is right.
Your parents were hit many, many times, correct?
yes,
And you didn't know what you were doing?
I knew that I was firing at them.
Now, when your father, I believe you indicated you are the one that put the shotgun up to the back of your father's head and pulled the trigger, correct?
Yes.
What was he doing when you did that to him?
I don't know.
Was that the first shot that you fired when you got into the room?
No, that was shots later.
Was your father threatening you when you put the gun to the back of his head and pulled the trigger?
I don't remember any conscious thing that he was threatening me. There's no thought of that. It was just that they're gonna kill us. This is it. We've been knowing that this might happen all weekend. So it was there. It was just sort of, I was just reacting to what I was feeling. I was just reacting. I don't remember any specific movements or anything that would have been more threatening until I saw or heard something that caused me to feel threatened.
Where was your father physically located when you put the gun to the back of his head and pulled the trigger?
I don't remember.
Was he seated or was he standing?
I guess I was over him because I believe I was a little to the side of the couch.
Yes.
Then would it be your testimony, Mr. Menendez, that after you came into the room, through the doors here on the left part of Exhibit 20, you started firing at your father, who was in the area right here where his body was later found, correct?
Right.
And could you tell if your first shot hit him?
I couldn't tell, but I believe it did. I'm
Well,
pretty sure it did, actually.
He was right. You claimed that he was rising up towards you. Did you see him thrown back into the seated position on the sofa?
I didn't see him rising up toward me. I saw him moving toward me. And he was standing. He was not rising. He was standing.
He was actually standing during this first shot.
Yes, he was.
Okay, and then what did you do next?
I just kept firing.
Did you see your father fall down into the sofa where his body was later found?
And he may have. I don't remember it.
When you put the gun up against the back of his head and you pulled the trigger, did you go around behind the sofa to do that?
Well, I didn't put it up against his head on purpose. I just don't remember it, but I know that I did that because of the picture, and I know that was me in that area. But I have no memory of actually doing that. It was just a rush and firing. And I know that I ended up on that side of the sofa because I remember looking in that direction.
Okay, so you know you were behind the sofa because you remember looking out in the direction of the television, correct?
Yeah, not really behind the sofa, but over to the left of it, right there.
Between this table and the sofa?
Right.
And you recall being there?
Right.
And you recall shooting him from that angle?
I don't think I actually remember that, but I know that I did.
Well, when you said you didn't do it on purpose, you didn't put the gun up against his head on purpose, are you saying that was an accident?
I'm saying that it wasn't intentionally done in that way. I was just firing, and I was afraid, and I was firing all over. You know, I was trying to hit the things that I saw, and I wasn't thinking consciously any particular way I was going to try and do it when I went in.
So that's, I mean, what she's really trying to get at there is whether or not this was essentially an execution of their parents, because, you know, with the shot that's directly to the head, it does have the feeling of an execution, in which case that would seem like it's much more of a premeditated kind of thing. So that's really what she's trying to get at. His explanation of like how he ended up there and in that position is interesting. I mean, I don't know how you guys feel about that specific explanation. I could go either way on it. You know, it could be the fog of war, so to speak, when, you know, when you're you know, you have high adrenaline, you think your life is about to end, you know, like that kind of thing. Like you can end up in a place that you don't remember how you got there, and you're just doing so many things one after another as quickly as possible. And, you know, maybe you don't remember how you got there or why you went there in the first place. That's possible. Or does it seem like he's more waffling on this? She obviously doesn't believe him because she is using her full body and her full face to say, to signal to the jury, this guy's full of shit. She makes that very clear from beginning to end, and basically to this day, even in all of her interviews, from what I've heard. But yeah, she's definitely signaling that she doesn't believe it. RW, thank you so much for another super chat. Very kind of you. Fair point. I need to watch all of these again and clear my biases to see how I would rule now. Jaded Gen Xer here. LOL. Completely understand. I mean, that's totally understandable. I mean, and the thing is, we can look at a set of facts, the same set of facts at one point, and have a completely different perspective on it based on other stuff that we've learned over time. You know, whether that makes them more guilty or less guilty, is entirely, you know, an individual kind of experience. But it's always that's why it's a great thing to revisit these cases, because they are just, I don't know, it's so fascinating, very fascinating to me. But thank you again for the super chat. Let's see here. And is there... Okay, sorry. Just reading the chat for a sec, but okay, let's continue on.
Mr. Menendez, you were not unconscious during this, were you?
No.
And you were not on drugs, right?
No, ma'am.
And you were not drunk?
No.
And you did not have any physical impairment at that time either, did you?
No.
When you went in the area behind the sofa and you unintentionally put the gun against your father's head and pulled the trigger, where was your mother?
Objection, this states the testimony.
She was, my memory is not good on this, but I think I remember her. Seemed to be around the side of the coffee table.
What was she doing?
In my mind, she was just sort of sneaking around the side of the coffee table and going in that direction. She had been standing, and now she was in a forward position. I don't actually remember movement, but I believe that's what I remember it looked like. But it could also be something that I heard.
You said your mother was sneaking. Is that correct? You just used that term, sneaking. Is that correct?
Yes.
And did you think that she was going to do something sneaky to you when she was crawling behind the coffee table?
No, I thought that we were in danger still.
You thought you were in danger?
I know that some.
That tone. If you are on the defense side at this point, you hate that tone. But if you are on the prosecution side right now, you're siding with her at this point on the jury. You're like, yeah, exactly. How could you possibly think that your mother was possibly going to do something to you at this point in the interaction? Like, how is that possible? But that goes to a question that was in the chat earlier about how common it is for an attorney to be making these kinds of expressions. I think it definitely depends on the courtroom. Some judges, are very much against a lawyer making faces. But then others, sometimes that can fall into the category of zealous advocacy, right? Because if as a lawyer, you're supposed to be signaling to the jury that you believe in your case. You absolutely believe in your case. You believe all of the words that are coming out of your mouth, all of the arguments that you are making, and your side should win. And so part of that, trial work is very theatrical. It's different from appellate work. It's different from, arguing something in front of the Supreme Court. It's trial work is you are creating theater for the jury to a certain extent. Obviously that can go too far. And different judges have different preferences on what they like to see in the courtroom, what they will allow, what they won't allow. But so, yeah, I would say it's relatively common for an attorney in the courtroom to, on cross-examination, sometimes show incredulity as to what the witness is saying, especially if there are points that could be hitting. The thing is, she's probably reading the room. She's probably reading the jury. She's probably reading the fact that there are some jurors that seem to be maybe making faces, maybe looking like they don't believe what Lyle is saying. And so her playing up that aspect of her incredulity as to what Lyle is saying and how he's explaining these things, it's giving ammunition to those jurors that are siding with her on this issue and in the case overall. Okay, let's continue.
Something about that freaked me out and caused me to run out of the room to the point where I would come back, or I would never have.
Okay, so something caused you to run out of the room, correct?
Right.
And this is after you'd shot your father in the head, correct?
Right.
And so your father was not going to help your mother anymore, correct?
I really wasn't thinking that, ma'am. I wasn't thinking as it was happening. This happened so fast. I was just reacting. It was just, I remember bursting in the room. I remember some very vague things, and then I remember it being over. And I remember dropping my gun barely and slumping against the wall. I wasn't thinking each step of the way what I was doing.
Okay, so when you went running out of
way.
When you went running out of the room, you went to the phone and you called 911 and you said, "I need help," correct?
No.
Okay, and you said you weren't thinking, it was just you were reacting, correct?
Right.
Okay, but 10 minutes later, you went back and got the shotgun shells because of fingerprints, correct?
10 minutes later.
Now, at the time that your mother died, she was about 48 years old, right?
Yes.
Was she in good physical condition?
I really don't remember whether she was or not.
Was she overweight?
I believe so.
She'd been depressed for a long period of time, hadn't she?
Yes.
What threat did your mother pose to you when you ran out of the room to reload?
Nothing that I can remember that was in my mind specifically, other than the same fear that caused me to go in the room and me reacting and something freaking me out more to the point where I ran out and ran back in, or I never would have. And I just remember that I did it.
So where did you go when you ran out of the room?
I went toward the front doors and through the front doors about a few steps.
And when you went out the front door, that was the front door that faced Elm Street, is that correct?
Right.
And when you went out the front door, where did you go?
I didn't go anywhere. My brother was there, and he was doing something with ammunition, I believe. I don't remember very well, but I remember getting a shell from him. I may have told him to give me a shell. He may have handed it to me. I don't remember.
How many new rounds did you put into your gun?
Just the one as I was running back.
One round, is that correct?
Right.
Okay, now, I believe you indicated that the ammunition that you reloaded your gun with was a different color than the ammunition which was already in your gun. Do you understand my question?
I think we know that now, but I didn't think about the color at that point. I was thinking about the colors beforehand when I was trying to get the kind that I knew for sure worked. Okay. But after that, I really wasn't thinking.
When you reloaded before you went in to kill your parents, how did you get the old rounds that were in the gun out of the gun? What mechanism did you use to get?
So this is interesting. Sorry, I totally cut off her question. I should have waited for her to finish and then for him to answer. But I had this thought. This is an important part for the prosecution's case right here, and also important for the defense to sort of work through, because, Debbie, you're right here. That's a problem. The fact that he left the room to reload and come back, that's an issue for the defense here, because that makes it look like there's time to process potentially, right? Unless he can explain it in a way that can give some sort of good reasoning for how that's still part of the whole moment, right? But what the prosecution is trying to do here is break down this entire event into subparts so that there are as many steps that have happened from beginning to end. Because if you can do that, you can show that there have been decisions made along the way, many decisions made along the way. It makes it at least seem, when you're thinking about this event, it makes it seem like this is much longer. This is not only much longer, but that there are many opportunities for this to have been cut off at this point, for the incident to end, for them to back off, for them to run away, for them to do something other than killing their parents. And that's what the prosecution really wants to hammer into the jury. Whether or not it's effective is another question. Obviously up to interpretation, and reasonable minds can always disagree. Okay, let's continue.
To get those rounds out. And how many rounds did you take out?
Took out all of them. Which
is how many?
I don't know. It was frantic, and I think you just pump it and it comes out, I believe. Pretty sure.
How did you know that?
Just from having worked the gun and the people explaining the gun to me at some point, and it was not complicated, that part anyway.
So getting the shells out of the gun was not complicated before you went in to kill your parents, correct?
Right.
Okay. Now, we are at the point where you went back outside after you saw your mother sneaking. You went back outside and your brother gave you one round. Is that correct?
Yes.
Why didn't you put in more?
Because I was scared and trying to get back to him as fast as possible, and I just didn't spend time to do more. I really don't have any particular memory of why I did a lot of these things that may not make a great deal of sense. It happened so fast. I was reacting to whatever I was feeling. And I just know now the things that happened, but I wasn't real, it just wasn't going through my mind at the time whether I would need more or what exactly was happening.
So you went back into the house, correct?
Right.
And then what did you do when you went back inside?
I ran back in the room, which is about,
Debbie, that's a good point too.
I don't know, 20 feet or so. And I remember really don't have any really memory of the run. Just, I do remember having to reach over a coffee table and doing that as I was running and firing.
You reached over the coffee table, is that correct? And you did, and then what did you do when you reached over the coffee table? Would you show us what you did? Hold your hands like you were holding your hands.
I think over the coffee table like that, but I really don't remember that. I just remember that I had to reach over.
And you clearly remember that you had to reach over the coffee table to get the gun. Where?
To where I last remember that I saw my mother, and I'm not exactly sure that I remember that it was my mother at the time I saw it, but my mother, who was sort of, I thought, scrambling or going around that coffee table. And at that point, just no understanding of whether she was wounded at all or anything, just feeling threatened.
What scary or sneaky thing was your mother doing when you came back into the room and reached over the coffee table with the gun?
Nothing. In fact, I remember talking to my brother about it not too long afterwards, and saying that she wasn't moving.
So you knew at the time that you put that last round into her that she wasn't moving, correct?
I wasn't thinking
What were you afraid
whether
of?
she was moving or not. I just for some reason remember saying to my brother that she was already dead, that she wasn't moving maybe. And
Were you afraid your mother might live?
no, I was afraid that my mother was, I wasn't thinking anything in particular. I can think back and I was afraid that I know that I didn't know that she was wounded in any way, and just that she was something that freaked me out about what she was doing. And I was in this, still reacting to what I was feeling when I ran in the room initially. And there was no time. It was only about 10, 15 seconds to get out and in. And it was just, I didn't think of anything in particular. So I can't really say well what it was at all.
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense when you're in the heat of the moment. Things may not be as crisp in your memory as they otherwise would in a non-traumatic moment. To me, that makes sense. By the way, Sandy, thank you so much for gifting 10 Legal Bites memberships. So kind and generous of you. So appreciate that. So Maya Johnson, Jennifer Pops, Christina M, Christina G, Gamer Deco, Dater, Deborah Shady. Oh, sorry, Dater's already a member. Deborah Shady, On the Ground, Linda Starner, and Gwendolyn SS, and Janice Smith. You have all been gifted memberships, excuse me, by Sandy. So welcome back to Bite Club, because there are some names that I recognize there. And I hope to see you guys on Friday. And thank you so much, Sandra. Thank you so much for gifting those. And as she says, member for 13 months. Thanks for being a member for so long. As she says, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you. Okay. Let's continue on with this.
Well, you were out of ammunition, weren't you?
Yes.
And your mother was still moving, wasn't she?
I didn't see her moving, but that's what I thought she was doing. It seemed like she was scrambling around the side of the coffee table.
You saw some movement on the side of the coffee table where you believed your mother had been, correct? Before you left the room to reload.
No, I didn't actually see movement, but she seemed to be in a moving position.
Did she cry out at all?
No.
Did your father cry out at all?
Not that I remember.
It could be that they did, but that he just doesn't remember because his memory blocked that out. But also, he did testify at some point that his mother I think his mother, maybe both of them, but that she had handguns, that those existed in the house as well. So I could also, I mean, he hasn't said it, so it's like we can't put words in his mouth, but I almost wonder if that was something that crossed their mind too. If it was like, well, maybe they went into the den and went in with firearms or something. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway.
So when you went back in, the television set was still on, right?
I'm gonna get Vegas with.
I'm sorry. When you went, after you reloaded and you went back in, the television set was still on, correct?
Right.
And you could see the figures in the room, couldn't you?
Not well.
And you put your gun over there, and is it fair to say you didn't know what portion of your body the gun barrel was resting on?
Right. The room was filled with smoke, and you could not see well at all, and you could just barely see. And I knew that was the area that had freaked me out, and I ran over to it.
Could you feel the gun hit something?
No, I don't have memory of that.
And then you pulled the trigger.
Yes.
Now, there was a telephone inside of the room, wasn't there?
I'm not sure.
Did your parents have a portable phone?
Yes.
And were you aware, may I approach please? The portable phone was behind some cushions here in the curved part of the sectional couch.
I'm not aware that it was.
Do you remember the police talking to you about that on September the 17th in New Jersey?
They may have.
Okay, and if in fact there was a portable phone found behind the cushions on the sectional couch, you didn't hide it there, did you?
No.
And you weren't afraid that your parents would call for help once you started to fire at them, were you?
No.
After you and your brother disposed of your clothing and disposed of the weapons.
Well, let's take a recess.
Okay.
Area, and we'll resume at 10 minutes after the hour. Don't discuss the matter among yourselves or with anyone else. Don't form any final opinions about it, and we'll resume at 10 minutes after the hour. Jurors are back, and we'll now resume with the cross-examination.
Mr. Menendez, after you disposed of the clothing, I believe you indicated you also cleaned out your car at the same time. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what items did you take out of your car and get rid of at the same time that you changed your clothing? You and your brother changed your clothing.
The boxes of shells, anything I could find that, there were wrappings and just little things still related to having bought the guns. And then the actual shells that we had picked up, the ones that I had.
Now,
Thanks.
all these items had been left inside of your brother's car from the time that you purchased the shotguns on the 18th until you disposed of them in the late at night on the 20th. Is that correct?
All the items except for the new shells that were bought and the ones that were picked up.
Now, during this period of time, between the time that you bought the shotguns and the time that you disposed of the items in your brother's car was parked in front of your family's home, correct?
I'm sorry, you confused me. Can you say that again?
Okay. I'm talking about the period of time between when you acquired the shotguns and when you disposed of the items behind the gas station, okay?
Right.
During that period of time when your brother was home and his car was there, it was parked in front of the house. Is that correct?
No.
Where was it parked?
At what point? Because
Was it ever parked in front during that period? That
sure. Yes. Usually he parked in front.
And that was his habit and his custom. Is that correct?
I really can't say that that's necessarily his habit and his custom. I just know that I have seen it parked in the front, and I also have seen it parked in the back. It just depended if he was just coming to talk to me. Like, I believe Sunday when he was checking in, all he did was come in the back and park, talk to me, and then leave. so that my parents wouldn't know that he was even there. But I don't know if that would be a regular thing for him.
Now, you indicated that you were very concerned that you not do anything to cause your parents to become suspicious during this period of time.
Right.
The fact that your brother was gone all day on Sunday, did you think that might cause some suspicion?
I thought that, he would have to explain himself if he was asked, more than likely. But there were some things that, he was just too afraid to be in the house. And, some things you just couldn't avoid.
Now, I believe that we were speaking about the fact that your brother, during this period of time, parked his car sometimes in the front of the house. Is that correct, during the 48 hours?
During the 48 hours. Yes, I think.
And that was the same area where
Yes. Sorry. Yes.
that was the same area where your parents parked their cars. Is that correct?
Right.
Were you concerned about the fact that your parents might see these items inside of your brother's car?
No, we didn't have anything that was that obvious. My brother's car has tinted windows. It's a mess in the back. It's all kinds of clothes and items, and it's a hatchback. And that's where everything was. I wasn't concerned that they were going to search through the car.
But you were very concerned that your parents were about to kill you. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you were very concerned that your parents were taking steps to prepare to kill you.
Yes.
And you didn't think that in preparing to kill you, your parents might snoop through your personal or your brother's personal effects. Is that correct?
Not in the car, right.
Okay. Did you hide the gun that you had inside of the guest house during this 48 hours?
Yes.
And where did you hide it when you didn't have it with you in the bed?
In the closet.
Did you take any steps to cover it within the closet?
Yes.
What did you do?
Just put it behind the things that were hanging. I had I believe it was a shelf, a mid shelf. So I could put it behind the hanging clothes. Nothing, no great hiding place. I really didn't have a great deal of concern that somebody was going to go in there for the first time and look around, but I just put it there anyway.
I believe you indicated that the last thing that you did before proceeding to the Santa Monica Civic was go to the gas station and change clothes. Is that correct?
Right.
Aside from driving, that was the last other thing you did, correct?
Right.
And at that time, I believe you indicated that you changed your shoes and your brother changed an article of clothing. What was the article of clothing that you recall him changing?
I remember him changing his pants and his shoes, I believe, also. And those are the only things I specifically remembered, but he may very well have changed his shirt also. I don't know.
All right, but you specifically know that he changed his pants and you believe his shoes.
I remember that, yes.
Did you see any blood on his pants before he changed them at the gas station?
I didn't, but he said, I guess he was concerned with it. I don't even remember if he said anything, but I knew he was changing his pants for that reason.
When you went to the movie theater to try to buy the tickets, you were dressed in the same clothes that you'd been wearing when you killed your parents, correct?
Right.
Okay. Were you at all concerned about any spots that you might have had on your clothing when you went to purchase the tickets?
No, I didn't see anything that I even noticed.
Did you look?
I'm sure I probably looked, but I don't really remember looking. I didn't see anything unusual.
When you came back to the house, that was at approximately 11:45. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, when?
I'm sorry. After going to the Santa Monica Civic, you went back to the house and arrived there at approximately 11:45. Is that correct?
That could be correct, yeah.
The last phone call to Perry Berman was at approximately 11:15 p.m., and the phone records indicate that it lasted for a minute, correct?
Right.
All right. Then you proceeded back to the parking lot at the Santa Monica Civic, and you went home.
Right.
Did you stop anywhere on the way home?
No.
Did you go straight home?
No. No, we were intending to go to the restaurant, and when we started falling apart, I decided to just drive around and see if we could regain our composure and maybe still meet Perry at the restaurant, because I really wanted to do that. And just driving around, and at some point just realizing that it's just getting worse, and just might as well go home and call.
Well, how long did you drive around? How much out of your journey, how much time out of your journey did you take to drive around before you went home?
I'm not sure, 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, not maybe 10 minutes, something like that.
Did you take any freeways that night? After you killed your parents, before you got home, did you take the freeway?
Yes, I think so. I have a memory of freeway. Like I said, for some reason, I don't remember the streets so well, probably because I was driving, not driving too well, but I remember being on the freeway, either going there or coming back. I think I was on the 405 at some point.
You were on the 405.
Believe so.
Were you ever on the Santa Monica freeway?
It could have been the Santa Monica freeway. I really don't know, but it was a freeway.
And when you were on the freeway, in which direction were you traveling? Were you traveling towards Los Angeles? Were you traveling towards Malibu? Which way were you going?
I don't remember exactly.
Do you remember getting off the freeway?
Yes.
And do you remember what exit you used?
No. I really don't remember the streets so well.
And when you got home, you went straight back into the house. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you parked the car, your brother's Escort, in the front there where your parents kept their cars, correct?
I believe so.
And you went inside the house. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then what happened next?
Well, we went inside the house, and my brother went into the room where my parents were.
Did you go with him?
I went and got him and brought him out of the room because he was hysterical.
Was he making noise?
Yes.
What kind of noise was he making?
Basically screaming.
Same kind of noise that you can hear on the back of the 911 tape?
Similar, not that bad, I don't think, at that point.
You mean the noise that he was making before you made the 911 call was not as loud as while you made the 911 call? Is that correct?
I really can't say for sure, but he did not seem as hysterical before as he did a few minutes later when I believe he went back in the room. That's what I assumed, why he was screaming again.
Now, did you tell your brother that you were going to call 911 after you retrieved him from the den? Did you tell him, I'm going to go call him?
I don't remember. I mean, he knew that's why we had gone to the house instead of meet Perry, but
Well,
I don't remember.
how did he know that's why you were going to the house? Had you discussed it?
Yes.
And you told him, we're going to go back to the house now and call the police.
Right, we just
Did I miss something? Did she call it a 911 call instead of a 911 call? That's very interesting because I feel like if anyone called it that back then, no one does today. Because like when people think 9/11, they think of 9/11. Interesting.
discussed it when I told him, I really wanted to meet Perry, but I clearly couldn't. And we were a mess. So we should just call. And said, fine.
Well, if you'd gone to meet Perry, you wouldn't have discovered your parents until after you'd been with Perry. Is that correct?
Right.
And were you fairly confident that Perry was not going to come back with you to the house that night?
No, I expected that from the restaurant, I could get Perry to come back to the house.
Well, Perry had indicated to you when you called him, hadn't he, that the next day was a work day for him and it was very late and he wanted to stay home, right?
Right.
And then when you called him back and said, meet me at the house, he said, no, I won't do that. I don't want to disturb your parents.
I believe so. I don't remember exactly, but that would not have been at all the first time that Perry and I had gone out somewhere and then he had come back to the house with me and just spent a few minutes hanging out and so on, saying goodbye at the house. Sometimes he would just change his mind and so we would stay up late and watch a video or something. And this happened many times. So that's what I was hoping I would get him to do.
You were hoping that Mr. Berman would witness you discovering your parents' body, weren't you?
No, there was no concern for whether he witnessed it or not.
You didn't want him there to be an alibi witness for you?
No, there was no way for him to be an alibi witness for me. I had missed the Taste of LA thing that I had told him earlier in the day I would try to meet him at. And now I had tried to meet him at the restaurant. And, you know, even if I had met him and gone back, it would not have been an alibi thing. It was just for my own wanting to have him there.
But Perry could have witnessed your shock and surprise at discovering the bodies of your parents, correct?
That's not why I asked him to be there.
So you went back to the house and you went inside and your brother went in the den. Then you got your brother and you went someplace and called 911, correct?
Right.
Where did you go?
I went upstairs to my mom's bedroom, if I remember correctly.
And which line did you use, if you recall? The family line or your own line?
The way my mother had the phone system, I mean, it was very hard to tell. There were buttons you could push to get the different lines, and so I really don't remember exactly one of them.
Where was your brother when you called 911?
Well, I believed he was in the room again.
Back in the den where your parents were.
Right.
Did you call Mark Heffernan?
No, at some point I think that my brother did.
Do you have any recollection of speaking to Mark Heffernan before the police arrived?
Not really, but it's possible.
Now, who is Mark Heffernan, and who was he to you at the time on August the 20th?
He's the person that when I play tennis in LA, I play tennis with Mark Heffernan. He's my tennis coach and my brother's, but mostly mine.
He was mostly your tennis coach?
Primarily, I guess that's the way it started. He coached my brother also, but I sort of remember him as mostly my tennis coach at that time.
After you made the 911 call and you came out of the house, do you remember having contact with the police?
Yes.
And
After I got out of the house?
after
Yes.
you got out of the house,
Right.
the police brought you out to the sidewalk area, correct?
Well, they ordered us out of the house, and they wouldn't come anywhere near the house. They were too afraid to come near the house, and they were sort of set up in positions. And I remember seeing all these people and having to sort of run out of the house through the gate.
So it was your assumption that the police were afraid when you came out of the house. Is that correct?
Well, that's what I was told when I asked what was going on.
So you didn't have any state of mind as to how the police felt when you came out of the house. You just came out of the house and you went to the area between the gate and the street. Is that correct?
Right.
And did you remember having any discussion with your brother while you were out there waiting for the police to go inside the house?
I didn't have any discussion. My brother was very hysterical and just crying and may have been screaming also. And then at some point was trying to get back in the house, I believe. But I just remember trying to comfort him, get him to relax and calm down. And I believe some of the officers helping me try and do that.
Sometime after that, you were taken to the Beverly Hills Police Department. Is that correct?
Right.
How did you feel about getting into a police car and going to the police department?
I didn't feel good about that.
Why not?
Just because I knew what had happened, and I didn't feel comfortable about going and having to tell them something different. Just didn't want to do it.
Did you have any discussion with your brother on the way to the police department?
Very short few words in the car because the guy was sitting in the front seat, but I was able to talk to him just a little bit.
And what did you talk to your brother about in the car on the way to the police station?
What he was going to do when he got there, because we were going there to be interviewed, and whether he would stay with what we had decided to stay, or whether he was going to say what really happened. And if he was going to say what really happened, then I wanted to know in advance, because he was very hysterical and crying. And my feeling was, even though we had discussed kind of what we would say, he just might not be able to do it and would just say what really happened. And if that was all going to come out, then I wanted to know. So I asked him.
And what did he tell you?
Well, we discussed it, and we would try and have Erik interviewed first if possible. And when he came out, he would tell me if it was okay to talk to the guy or whatever it was. He would say something that would tell me it was okay to say what we had decided. or he would say something that, he had just said what really happened, and then I would know at that point, and I would decide what to do, but I wouldn't go in and just, tell that story.
So as luck would have it, your brother was interviewed first, correct?
Right.
And then he came out and he made some comment to you, is that correct?
Yes, he did.
And what did he tell you?
Something like it's okay, you can talk to him, or something to that effect.
Now, then you went in and you spoke to Sergeant Edmonds, correct?
Right.
And at that time you knew that you could lie to Sergeant Edmonds and you wouldn't have been contradicted by your brother's previous interview, correct?
Right.
Now, referring to page 2 of the interview of August the 21st, starting at line 1. Do you recall being asked by Sergeant Edmonds where your brother's car was when you left that night to go to the movies?
Yes.
Do you remember telling him that your brother's car was parked in back?
Right.
Okay, was that true or was that a lie?
No, that was something we had decided to say.
Okay, why did you decide to say
Sorry. I'm hearing something. I've got to be right back.
that?
Because I felt that I had run out of the house.
Sorry guys, there's a fire alarm going off, so I'm gonna have to pause things real quick and go and investigate. I apologize in advance. I'm gonna have to leave you guys with a bit of a holding pattern. I hate doing this, but I probably should go and investigate just to make sure things are okay. Okay. All right, sorry guys. Okay, and we're back. So sorry about that, but I appreciate a ton of you sticking around. I really thought that people would maybe leave. But yeah, everything's fine. Turns out it was some kind of a I don't know, some kind of a false alarm. So, annoying to have an interruption, of course, but of course, I'm also very, very glad that we didn't have a fire going on here because all kinds of problems could have happened with that. Um, so anyhow, uh, we are back. We are back, and pardon that interruption. Of course, thank you so much, you guys, for being so patient with that. Obviously, like no one knew how long that interruption was going to last. Um, and yeah, we did. We evacuated briefly, but halfway down the stairs, I was told by someone working for the building that that it was a false alarm, and so all the way back down, I was like, you know what, I might as well take Indy to pee real quick, and then came back up. So anyway, so everything's okay, everything's good, everything's fine. And Indy has an empty bladder now, so we know that there will be no interruptions, unless there's some sort of false alarm that happens again, which would be extra annoying. But I don't know if I would listen to that one. Anyway, okay, all right, cool. We just that's what happens with live streams, right? Sometimes things happen, and we just roll with it. So let's continue on with the testimony.
The house, obviously, with a gun in my hand, and we had left the house, and we figured that people could easily have seen us.
So you wanted Sergeant Edmonds to think that you and your brother had gone out the back, and that if any of your neighbors had seen people in the front, those would have been the real killers, right?
Well, not necessarily. I don't think I thought it through all the way to that, but basically that whoever they saw in the front was not us. And I wasn't sure if they were going to see anybody or not, but basically that's true, yes.
So at the time that you spoke to Sergeant Edmonds, at approximately 1:42 a.m., you had already decided to say that your brother's car had been in back when you left that evening.
Right.
So that in case anybody had witnessed you in the front of the house, you could divert attention and say, that was the killer, that wasn't us, we went out the back. Is that what you're trying to convey to him?
Right.
Now, you also told him at page 3, line 21, you also told him that the reason you went back to the house that night, at the time that you discovered your parents' bodies, was you went to pick up your brother's identification, some false identification that he had.
Right.
Okay, why did you tell that to Sergeant Edmonds?
Because at that point, we were in a state that we couldn't go meet Perry, obviously, and so we needed to have a reason why we didn't meet Perry. So that was the only thing that we could think of, was basically we just say we went to pick up an ID.
And that was for the purpose of having your brother be able to drink because he was underage in California, correct?
No, that was for the purpose of trying to now figure out if there was something that could be. Things just kept, we were just sort of trying to make this up as we went along. And then as things happened that we didn't expect, try to just think of something to say. So when I had no expectation I wouldn't be able to meet with Perry. And when this happened, I had to say something. So we decided to say that.
Well, when is it that you decided that you would tell the police that the reason you'd gone back to the house was to pick up some fake ID?
Once I had made the decision that we weren't getting worse and not better.
Well, was that after you disposed of the evidence or before you left the house that night?
No, right after I had decided that we should go to the house, and I'd just call 911 as opposed to meet with Perry.
And then during that discussion you said, and when we talk to the police, we'll tell them the reason we came back here was to get false ID so that when we met with Perry, we'd have it for my brother.
Right, exactly.
And you planned that all out, right, to tell him, Sergeant Edmonds?
It wasn't a big plan, but it was what we had decided to say, yes.
You also told him during that interview, page 3, line 11, that you had called Perry from the Civic Center from a pay phone. Do you remember telling him that?
Yes.
And why did you tell him that you had called Perry from the Civic Center? Was there a reason?
Well, I think he was taking me through the night and what I did, and I was explaining where I was. Said I went to the movies. After that, went to meet friend, Perry at the Civic Center, and had missed him, and so called him and was supposed to meet him at a restaurant.
And at the time that you told this to Sergeant Edmonds, you knew that you had made a credit card call versus a cash call from the pay phone at Santa Monica Civic, correct?
No, ma'am. I've used the credit card to make almost all the phone calls I've ever made in my life. I use Sprint cards and whatever cards my mother had, and I'm sure there's records to reflect that. And it was not something done on purpose.
Then
Didn't
in
like
the
that
interview,
answer.
you discussed with Sergeant Edmonds reasons
You could tell by the look on her face, she didn't like that answer.
why this crime might have occurred, and we went over those earlier. But at that time, you told him that it would be your father, which would be the reason it would have happened, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Well, when was it you decided that you were going to tell Sergeant Edmonds that?
We didn't have any discussion about what we would tell him. I had no idea he would ask.
Well, did you just make this up as you went along then, this portion of the interview with Sergeant Edmonds?
Yes.
And you hadn't thought out beforehand what you would say in the event that you had to use the shotgun in self-defense. Is that correct?
Say that again.
When you bought the shotgun on Friday night, you bought more ammunition on Saturday, you knew there was a possibility you'd have to use it, correct?
Yes.
And you knew that if you had to use it, that someone might die, correct?
Yes. But I wasn't really thinking that. I was sort of buying the shotgun to feel safer, and I don't think I took it as far as thinking, we'll use it, someone will die.
When you were a child, before you had talks with your father, you used to prepare notes for those talks, correct?
Right.
You used to prepare yourself for your tennis matches, correct?
Yes.
You would write down lists of things to do for your tennis matches, correct?
Whatever my dad wanted me to do. Yes.
Okay. And you would also then write down things that you would tell your father when he'd call you to ask how you had done during tennis or a tennis match, correct?
I would prepare for conversations with my dad.
Are you telling me then that when you purchased the guns on Friday and the ammunition on Saturday, that you did not think through the consequences of what you would do in case you had to use the gun and the ammunition?
No, definitely not. I never thought about that. I'm only trying to survive and hope it didn't happen and hope that it never happened.
And then at 1:42 a.m. on August the 21st, you told Sergeant Edmonds that the reason that your parents might have been killed is because of your father and his business association with seedy people, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
And that was spontaneous, is that correct?
Right.
May I have a moment, please? Near the end of the interview that you had with Sergeant Edmonds, you told him, page 11, lines 4 through 6, you told Sergeant Edmonds that your mother was the great tragedy in all of this. Remember saying that to Sergeant Edmonds?
I remember very little of what I said to Sergeant Edmonds, but I know from, hearing it again that I said that, yes.
Do you remember expressing the sentiment that I've just read to you, to Sergeant Edmonds, that your mother was the great tragedy, or something of that sentiment to Sergeant Edmonds?
Again, I don't remember it, but I'm sure I said it. It's on tape.
Why did you say that?
Because I was feeling bad and guilty about my mother dying.
Well, when you went outside to reload, did you feel your mother was a great tragedy?
When I went outside to reload, I was confused and just afraid. And I wasn't thinking that these were even my parents. I was just thinking that danger and just going through the motions of reacting to what was happening.
Do you remember also in that interview, page 13, starting at line 23, do you remember telling Sergeant Edmonds the following? That it doesn't seem like they heard anything because they were on the couch. And my dad was, and my brother, my dad is usually pretty, and then there's an unclear word, it's either deaf or good. My dad is usually pretty something to hear something. Did you tell him that your father was pretty deaf or pretty good at hearing things?
I don't remember.
Well, was your father deaf when it came to hearing noises in the house?
He was, to my knowledge, had no hearing problems, but he was nowhere near as good as my mother as far as being aware of noises. So I probably said pretty deaf, probably. But I don't know.
And then you said to hear something. So when he gets up right away, and then it goes on. And so I was really surprised that he was sitting on the couch like that. And then there's some unintelligible. It says, my mother was on the floor like she was trying to get away or something. I don't know. Do you remember telling Sergeant Edmonds that?
No, I don't remember. But I'm sure I was just telling him what I saw when I went in the room.
Your mother wasn't sneaking, was she? She was trying to get away from being shot to death.
I don't know. I really
Objection,
don't.
speculation.
At the end of the interview with Sergeant Edmonds, he told you what the protocol was in terms of your returning to the house. Do you remember that part of the interview?
I don't remember the interview very well. I'm sure he did.
Well, he told you that one of the reasons he didn't want you to go in the house is so you wouldn't be traumatized. And the other reason he didn't want you to go in the house is to disturb evidence. Remember him telling you about disturbing evidence?
No.
But after you talked to Sergeant Edmonds, you went back to the house to recover items from your brother's car. Is that correct?
The next morning, not after I talked to him.
Well, you talked to him at about 1:42. I believe the conversation took approximately 20 minutes.
Right.
Correct? You went back to the house at 5:30 a.m. Is that correct?
I went to my coach Mark's house. We slept there. I woke up actually I didn't sleep, but I was supposed to sleep there. And in the morning,
And who took you back?
I came back. I took a cab.
Who took you back to Mark's house?
Mark, I think.
And he drove you from the police station
Right.
in his own car back to his residence. Is that correct?
Yes, he did actually, because he came over with us.
And then you took a cab back to the house at about 5:30 a.m. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you go alone?
I can't remember. I probably not. Probably Erik went with me, but I can't remember.
Mark was not with you. Is that
No,
correct?
he wasn't with me. No.
What was your intent in returning to the house by taxi at 5:30?
I just felt that I wanted to search the car because I was concerned about them. I just felt that if they got to search the car, then they would know we were involved, and that I was afraid that was going to happen.
When you went back at 5:30, were you able to search the car?
Yes.
Now, prior
No, actually, I was not able to search the car. I was told to leave and come back.
and who told you that?
Not sure who exactly.
Do you recall seeing Detective Zoller there at 5:30 a.m. when you went back the first time?
He was probably there. Yeah, he probably was.
Well, is it probably or you recall it? You don't recall it, just
I recall that he was there either the first or the second time, but and I assume he was there all night. But I can't. I don't know if he's exactly the person I talked to or not. I really can't recall.
then you returned at 8:30, and it was at that time that you were able to search the car and remove further evidence, correct?
Right.
When was it that you threw away the theater tickets that you'd purchased that had the wrong time on them?
I gave them to my brother.
So you don't know when they were discarded, is that correct?
No.
When you went back at 8:30, how did you get there?
When I went back at 8:30 in the morning.
Yes.
I believe I just waited I'm not positive, but I think I just waited.
For 3 hours?
I think so. I'd taken a cab and the person left. And I don't believe, they wouldn't let me use any of the cars or anything. So I think I just waited. I may have somehow gotten to Beverly Hills and stayed in the town for a little while and come back, but I don't remember it very well.
Do you remember telling Detective Zoller that you needed to get into the room, into the den, to get tennis equipment?
Yes.
Okay. Now, if you knew that there were items in the car, why did you want to get back into the den?
Because I didn't want to alert him to the fact that there were possibly items in the car. So I just asked if I could get something out of the house and then hope that he would say okay or something, and I would eventually maybe get over to the car and be able to search the car. And that's what happened.
Okay, so you just killed your parents. You've been questioned by the police. There were police officers crawling all over the house. And you had the presence of mind to use a diversionary tactic like asking for your tennis equipment inside the house so that the detectives wouldn't be suspicious of your car. Is that correct?
Yes. And actually, at that point, called an attorney.
Now, when you returned to the car, did you search the car in the presence or where you could see other people?
I'm sorry, guys. I'm not smiling because of the testimony. I'm smiling because of the cat behind me. Just real quick. Holmes has found he has found the candles that are over the desk. Yeah. He's gonna have fun for this next month with these candles. We'll see if they stay up. He was having some fun when I was putting them up earlier today. So yeah. Yeah. We'll see. We'll see if they end up staying there. Did I think that did I intend to make a jungle gym for the cats? No, I didn't. But now that it's here, I'm kind of satisfied with it. Okay. All right. Sorry. That's a bit of a distraction. We'll get back. Let's get back to the testimony.
Around. In other words,
Well, the officer let me search the car.
And in the presence of a police officer, you searched the car and recovered evidence. Is that correct?
No, he wasn't standing there. He was sort of hanging out in the carport, and I just asked him. Now I remember, actually, the car was parked on this curb of the street, I believe. And I said, there's some things in the car I'd like to get out that I need. Can I just go through the car? And he said, sure, don't worry about it. Just go through the car. And so I spent quite a bit of time actually going through the car and taking things out of the car. And he wasn't concerned with that at all.
Weren't you scared to death?
At that point, I was sort of just searching through the car and hoping that I would be able to get, if there was something in the car, get something out of the car and get out of there, yes. Yeah, I couldn't sleep all night for lots of reasons, but one of them was just expecting to be arrested in the morning when they went through the car, which I had expected they would do.
And so you coolly walked back in there and searched the car with the police at least in your visual presence. Is that correct?
And nothing that happened those 2 days was coolly. It was just me very afraid that they were going to go into the car and trying to see if I could do something to prevent that and go there first.
Did you find any evidence inside the car during that search?
Yes.
What did you find?
I found wrapping, things that related to the purchase of the shotgun, like wrapping things and maybe even some papers related to it. I also found some shell casings that were just among the clothes in the back because it was really a mess. And I believe that's it.
And what did you do with those items when you removed them from your brother's car?
I put them in one of the tennis bags that was in the car, I believe, and I took them out. And at that point, I'm pretty sure my brother was there, and Mark may have been there in the morning also. He brought my brother over, and the attorney was there, and I just kept them in the bag, took them out, and probably put them in Mark's car, but I can't remember exactly.
Did you ultimately destroy the items which you had recovered from the
Well,
car?
I threw them away, yes.
Right. Shall we break for lunch, Your Honor?
All right, it's a little afternoon. We'll,
Time for lunchies.
depending on your timepiece, it's almost noon. We'll recess until 1:45. Ladies and gentlemen, don't discuss the matter with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it. And we'll resume at 1:45.
This cat is so funny.
After your parents' death, when was it that you first became aware that wills had been located for your parents?
Within a day or two.
Who located those wills, if you know?
I don't know. I believe was found in the house.
Was it done by someone other than yourself?
Yes.
And that would have been by the Tuesday, the 22nd of August, that these wills were located?
I believe so, yes.
Do you have any?
So they've already moved on to the subject of the wills. But yeah, she keeps trying to point to all of these decisions that they made along the way during the incident and then after the incident to try to paint them as, I don't know, some kind of, I mean, folks saying in the chat, like some kind of a mastermind. And so far, the impression that I have is that, from listening to the testimony, is that they, there were some things that they in the moment had some clarity on something, but they didn't want fingerprints on the shells. If they had thought about fingerprints ahead of time, they could have worn gloves and then had zero fingerprints at all. So to me, thinking about fingerprints in the moment does not equal, malice aforethought. At the same time, then going back for the shells and then, or I don't know, just all of this other stuff. It's just, it seems like they were making haphazard decisions and just kind of on the fly. Like, how do we clean this up real quick? We're in a jam. We're, it just a lot of that. It doesn't come across to me like they had thought any of this out in advance, and they kind of were lucky that they weren't caught like immediately, basically. So I'm not convinced by what the prosecution is trying to say here. Also, were there questions here that I saved, or maybe some comments? Oh, Dalabar, this is an interesting point. From my understanding, all the females believe the boys, all the males didn't. And this is interesting because normally in any kind of an SA case or an R-ing case, typically, attorneys don't want, prosecution doesn't want women on the jury. If there's a woman that has been victimized by a man or by anyone, right? A woman being victimized, you don't want women on the jury. The reason for that is because it hits a little bit too close to home for a lot of women. A lot of women are more likely to be like, well, I wouldn't put myself in that situation. Well, I might not have worn that. Well, I might not have. And it's not because they are being judgmental against the woman. It's because it hits too close to home. And so it's like, it creates kind of this cognitive dissonance. And that creates them, or that leads them to be a bit more harsh on the victim and on the victim's choices. So that's one reason why. And so it actually kind of makes sense to me that in this case where they're the defendants, but on this particular issue, the question of whether or not they were abused by their parents, that is a point where the alleged victim is male. So having on that issue, all of the women believing the defendants, and then all of the men not believing the defendants, it could be because they're like, well, that's just not a thing. It's just too worrisome to believe that something like that would exist in this world, or that any man or boy would would allow themselves to be in that kind of a position, that they would do things differently to take themselves out of that circumstance so that that wouldn't happen. It's just, it like I said, it hits a little bit too close to home sometimes. So I wonder it, I don't know that that's what happened here, but it seems interesting to me. And I wonder if that was at play, that sort of bit of psychology was at play. All right, let's continue on.
Any recollection of who located them?
No, I know at some point Carlos Baralt, who was the executor, had them. I thought they actually came from New Jersey because it was an old will, and then I learned later, I'm not sure at what point, that they were found actually in the house. So I really didn't really know.
Did you make any attempt to locate your parents' wills after they died?
No.
Did you ever go anywhere or do anything to try to locate their wills?
No, I went with the relatives and Carlos when he went to the bank to go into the safety deposit box, and he was looking for a new will because we all believed that there was a new will. But the old will, he had already had that, but he was looking for a new will, I believe.
All right, so it's your best recollection that your uncle Carlos Baralt was already in possession of the older wills
Right.
when you went to the bank to look for a subsequent or later will. Is that correct?
Right.
And do you remember about when it was that you went to the bank looking for the other will?
Could be Wednesday or Thursday or something later in the week.
Was it the same day that you went shopping, or was it a different day?
I don't remember. It was either that day or the day after, I believe. Carlos, I don't think got there till late Monday or early Tuesday, maybe late Monday. And at some point he found the old will, and then at some point he went to the bank. So I would think it's like Wednesday or Thursday.
And you accompanied him to the bank?
Yes.
And were you able to gain access to your parents' safety deposit box at the bank?
Yes.
And how was that done?
I believe Carlos just said he was the executor, that my parents were no longer alive, and that they should open the safety deposit box. Not to take anything out, but just to do an accounting of what's in there, and also to see if there was a new will.
Was there any delay in gaining access to the safety deposit box?
I don't believe so. I mean, they had to drill it open. Obviously, they didn't have the key, I believe. There might have been a short delay, but not to the point where we left the bank. I don't think there was a delay. I don't think they had a problem with it. I think there was some discussion because they weren't going to let us take anything. They would drill it open, and basically the agreement was could go in and look and see what was there and make an accounting of it, but nothing could be taken unless he had court permission. So there might have been a small delay for that.
And were you present when the box was in fact drilled open?
Not actually there when it was drilled open, but I was there for the whole thing and rode back with everybody when it was over.
Did you become aware of the contents of the safety deposit box after it was opened?
Yes.
And were there any wills inside?
No.
Was there anything else inside of the box?
Yes, there were personal papers of my parents, jewelry, several items of jewelry.
Now, I believe you testified on cross-examination that at some point you had possession of some of your mother's jewelry and some of the personal papers. Is that correct?
Yes.
Were any of the items that you just previously described, either yesterday or the day before, were any of those items things that were eventually taken from the safety deposit box?
The ones that I took from the house originally? No, I took them from the house.
The items in the safety deposit box, the personal papers and the jewelry, what became of those things?
I'm not sure. I assume that Carlos has them.
Did you ever get any?
I'm not sure that they were. He may actually have taken everything out before I was arrested, but I'm not really even sure of that.
So you never had possession of any of these personal papers or the jewelry from the safety deposit box, is that correct?
Right.
Now, on Thursday, when you bought the Rolex watches, did you use any form of identification to give to the woman who completed the transaction?
Yeah, I gave my New Jersey license, I believe. I really don't remember that. I mean, she says that I heard her testify, and she said that she asked me for ID. My recollection is that she did not ask me, and I normally don't give ID when I use my dad's credit card. It's just a Gold American Express, and I'm usually not asked for ID. They just authorize it, and the number comes up, and I purchase whatever. But if I did, I would have just given her my New Jersey license.
Now, is there a reason you didn't use your father's American Express card to buy yourself a Rolex watch before he died?
No?
And there was no reason at all that you waited until after he died to use his card to buy this purchase? Is that correct?
There's no reason, no.
On Friday, August the 25th, there was a memorial service for your parents at the Screen Actors Guild, correct?
Right.
And at that, was it you or your brother who spoke?
My brother, basically, I spoke because I believe I introduced my uncles. I may have spoke very briefly, but I was not one of the people that was to address the group. So I was just in the background.
And it was during that service that your brother spoke about your parents. Is that correct?
I believe he spoke basically about my dad's involvement with the company and his dreams and things about the company, since that was what that memorial service was for my dad's business associates. Primarily friends in LA too, I guess.
When did you go back to New Jersey after that memorial service, sir?
That was a Friday. I think I went that night.
And then on Monday, August the 28th, there was a funeral for your parents. Is that correct?
Right.
Now, you had your parents cremated. Is that correct?
Yes.
Was there a reason that you cremated your parents' remains?
Yes.
And why was that?
If I remember correctly, I believe my brother had said that my mother had said she wanted to be cremated at some point in her life. She had made that statement, so we made that decision.
All right, so the decision to cremate your parents was because of your mother's wishes and not because of your wishes. Is that correct?
Right.
And you weren't trying to hide anything by having your parents cremated. Is that correct?
No.
Okay. And on Monday at the funeral, you spoke, correct?
At Monday, yes.
And you gave a speech about your parents, correct?
Right.
And what did you say about your parents?
I talked about
I'm going to object to this point as hearsay.
Overruled.
I talked about my dad's dreams for success, his complete loyalty to the family success and the generations, and how he wanted that to carry on, and how my brother and I would try to live up to what he wanted for us. I talked about I talked a little about my mother. Would have wanted the people that were in the audience who were friends of my parents. He would have wanted them to put their best face forward and put this behind them, and not grieve for her and let that interfere with her life and just her philosophy with regard to that, and that's probably what she would say to them. I said some other things about my dad's achievements.
Did you prepare for this speech?
No, I remember feeling that I remember being up most of the night, feeling that I should have something for sure in mind to say and wanting to prepare. And I was with Jamie, my ex-girlfriend, I believe, and also some other friends, and upset that I had nothing prepared. And I believe she was trying to tell me, that's okay. You just get up there and say what, you think that they would want you to say to their friends. So that's what I did.
In light of the fact that you had killed your parents, did you find it awkward to give this speech on Monday?
Yes, very.
Why didn't you decline to do so?
Because I felt that my dad would want me to do that, and he would have been proud of me to get up there and do it, even though I didn't want to.
You thought your father would be proud of you even though you are the one that killed him?
Yes.
Between Monday, the 28th, and Thursday, August the 31st, when you went to Los Angeles, I believe you indicated that there was a family meeting about accessing the computer. Is that correct?
Say that again, a family meeting about accessing. They had already tried to access the computer. And then I heard the discussion afterwards about what they had found and what they would do.
Do you remember when it was that I believe it was your father's cousin, Carlos Menendez, tried to get into your mother's computer to see if there was another will? Do you remember what day that was?
I'm not sure what day that was.
But it was in Los Angeles, correct?
Right.
Because that's where her computer was.
Correct.
Okay. And then once you got back to New Jersey and after the memorial service, you became aware of the fact that someone in your family named Eileen had made arrangements for an expert to come and look at your mother's computer in Los Angeles, correct?
Well, I may have known that from the discussions we had in California already. That may have already been the arrangement, but I'm not sure. It could have been in New Jersey.
But you also learned when you were in New Jersey that your father's cousin, Carlos Menendez, had made his own arrangements to go to the family computer. Is that correct?
Right.
And I believe you indicated that that made you suspicious.
Yes.
Did you know what kind of company your father's cousin worked for?
Yes.
What kind of company was
I
it?
believe he worked for Merck.
And what kind of company is that?
Pharmaceutical company.
And the fact that Carlos Menendez had made these arrangements made you suspicious. Why?
He's just from what I knew of Carlos Menendez, and just him being similar type of businessman to my father, and I felt to a much lesser degree, but still this is really, I don't like to say bad things about him because I really don't know, but I felt like he might be a shady type of businessman also, like my dad, that my dad and him were sort of competitors in that regard. And I knew my dad didn't trust him from things he would say about Carlos Menendez. And I just was very suspicious about why he would not keep the original arrangement. Eileen was incredibly upset about it. And he seemed to be sort of sneaking through my brother to do it, and just made me very suspicious as to what he wanted to do with this computer.
Now, Eileen was a relative of yours on which side of your family, your mother's or your father's?
My father's.
And so you decided to come to Los Angeles on the day before your father's cousin had made arrangements to access the computer, correct?
Right.
How was it you knew that September the 1st was the date that Carlos Menendez had made arrangements to access the computer?
Because I spoke with my brother, who knew all about it.
And so your brother gave you this information?
Right.
And that was sometime before Thursday, the 31st of August?
Right.
Now, was it your understanding that your brother was going to be present when Carlos Menendez's computer expert came to access the computer?
Yes.
And was it your understanding that Carlos Menendez was or was not going to be present? What was your
No, he wasn't going to be present.
So in spite of the fact that Carlos Menendez was not going to be present on September the 1st, you still thought that he was up to something fishy. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what did you think? His computer expert.
I didn't know what to think. I couldn't think of any reason why he would hurt Eileen's feelings in that way and disregard her and sort of try to sneak an expert of his own in. And I didn't know who this guy was. Is he a legitimate expert or what? I knew that my brother was just sort of accepting whatever Carlos said about it, Carlos Menendez. And it just seemed this didn't seem proper for a cousin of my dad's to hire his own person, or if it was a friend of his or whoever it was, to go into my house, to my mother's computer, without contacting the executor and getting permission, when all these elaborate arrangements had been made with Eileen and her friend at IBM, especially with regards to information on my mother's computer. It just seemed very unusual.
All right, so before you left for Los Angeles on the August the 31st, you contacted the executor to tell him what you were going to do, correct?
No. What I wanted to do was go there, see what was on the computer, and then basically erase the computer and leave it in a way, hopefully, that nobody would know that I had been there, and then see what Carlos was going to do.
Why didn't you just go on September the 1st and see what Carlos was going to do?
Because if I would have been there, then I don't think anything would have happened. I wanted to see if he had planned something with my brother wouldn't have known about it, but with this guy that was coming over. I was just very suspicious of what he was up to. Not necessarily that he would create a new will, but I didn't know whether he would create a new will or letters or what he could do anything on a computer. So I just wanted to find out.
So you thought if you went on the 1st, that it might prevent Carlos from going forward with whatever plan he had. But if your brother was there, then he might go ahead. Is that what you're saying your state of mind was? Yes.
Basically, my brother was very unstable at this time, I think impressionable. And I think it was taking advantage of my little brother not asking me, or at least the executor, to go into the house without permission and do that.
So you were very concerned that one of your father's relatives might try to inherit something that he wasn't entitled to. I mean, that's the gist of what you're saying.
No, there was no way he could do that. That's why Carlos Baralt, the executor, had no concern for the whole affair, because nothing on a computer would be valid, he said. So he didn't even plan to be there when the expert that was originally hired was supposed to show up. But it was just a personal thing between Carlos Menendez and I thought that he might be trying to do something, and I just wasn't sure what it was. And afterwards, I told him that, and we discussed it, and he was angry with me, and I was angry with him, and we just, expressed that to each other and worked it out.
When you went to Los Angeles on August the 31st, you thought you had already been disinherited by your father, correct?
Right.
But you'd seen the wills that Carlos Baralt found either the Tuesday or Wednesday the week before, correct?
Right.
And you knew from those wills that you were going to inherit.
Right.
Because you knew from those wills that if both your mother and father were dead, you and your brother would get the estate. Right?
Right. But I knew by the time I went to go to the computer that there was no new will on the computer. And I knew that there was no new will, period.
How did you know that?
Because the executor had told me that he had a conversation in the spring with my dad, in which my dad said to him that he was thinking of taking us. He wanted to do a new will, and he wanted ask Carlos if he wanted to be the executor, and Carlos said he would be the executor. And then he said he was thinking of taking us out of the will to Carlos, and Carlos said something to him about whether that was a good idea and this and that, and my dad decided not to do that and said he had already told us that we were out of the will, and he was just going to leave it that way, that he had told us anyway. So I knew this from Carlos, and once Carlos told me that, I figured there was no new will. He just hadn't made one.
When did you get this information from Carlos?
Sometime in that period, I believe.
All right, so you had information from your Uncle Carlos that your father that spring, the spring of 1989, had considered disinheriting you, correct? And he had talked about that possibility with Carlos.
Right.
Okay, and your father was living in Los Angeles and Carlos was living in New Jersey.
Correct.
And you took it from that everything was okay and there was no new will. Is that correct?
No, not necessarily. I still felt that my dad go ahead and make a new will and take me out anyway.
Why was your father going to disinherit you in the spring of 1989? Do you know?
I believe it was because of the girlfriends and things of that
You
sort.
already went over
Apparently,
it.
he had not made a decision to
We went over this, and I feel like he went over this with her as well. So like this for me, like this whole section right now is I'm admittedly a little bit checked out. um because partly because here's a question. Igloo Pop asked a good question. Can you have a legally binding will in a computer? This is something that I am confused about personally, and it's not because of law, it's because of the technology. The technology of the day, if it was like a Word document that nobody has signed, no, then it's not. It's a maybe a draft of a will is what you would find, because I'm pretty sure that back in the day they couldn't have like PDFs on a computer like we do now. Depending on what they had, like the computers that I remember in the early to mid 90s, which this actually would have been late 80s when this, happened. It was like, where the screen is green and the font is white and it's very pixelated. Like not what we have today where everything is like photorealistic, like you guys are able to see me on computers. So this whole bit about the will and looking for the will, it just, to me, it doesn't make any sense, because none of that would be legally enforceable. I understand why the prosecution wants to go through it, because it makes it seem like they killed their parents for the money, and that's the theory that they're going with. Of course, they have to try to put on their case, but none of it seems particularly compelling to me, partly because it's like you would just have a draft Word document on a computer. What does that mean for anything? And also Dater says Lyle had some bad stuff about how Jose dealt with his business. How likely is it that testimony from this trial caused the police to look into the company? Based on what we know about what the police was doing in investigating this case, something tells me they probably didn't. They probably didn't look into it at all. There are allegations that Jose, did things to the kids, and they apparently didn't look into that any further either. So anyway, yeah, my guess is probably no one looked into it, but that's a bit of a speculation on my part. I will admit. Sometimes you can have people like, looking into it because it comes up like this, but I don't know. I'm a bit pessimistic that they actually went in and investigated.
To do that, but he told Carlos that he was thinking about it. He wasn't sure, but that he had told us that we were out.
And he had told you that himself, hadn't he?
Yeah.
Okay. But then on Tuesday or Wednesday, the 22nd or 23rd of August, you found out that you were still in the will, at least the will that everybody thought was the valid will, correct?
Right.
And when you went to Los Angeles, you wanted to make sure that there was no new will that would disinherit you.
No, we knew that before we left Los Angeles, because everybody had gone through the computer. And my aunts, Carlos Menendez and Carlos Baralt, the executor, had been at the computer himself. And he said that the only thing that was in the computer were the 3 entries, and that there was nothing in them, and that he had no real concern for the matter. And somebody suggested that Eileen should get an expert, and he just basically thought it was a waste of time because it's not valid, and he was not going to waste his time with it. So I wasn't concerned for that at all. This was just a personal thing between Carlos Menendez and I, and my aunt and uncle, who were the executors, stayed out of it completely. Even at the house when Eileen was upset, they didn't want to get involved. So it had nothing to do with estate matters and actual wills and stuff like that, or Carlos would have definitely involved himself. It was just something that I was suspicious of and was personal.
Did you know how an IBM computer worked on August the 31st of 1989?
No.
Did you know anything about them aside from how to turn it on?
Not really.
All right. So did you have faith that that computer didn't somewhere in the dark reaches of its memory have a will? Didn't you think that maybe there was still a will inside that computer that you couldn't get to and your relatives couldn't get to?
No, because there was a file called will. So we assumed that it would be under will. But I suppose there could have been something in there. But the other problem was that this was my mother's computer. And I had a hard time believing that my dad, who would have been the one that made the will, would have just had my mother work it out on her computer, because my dad knew nothing about computers. And it just seemed to me if my dad was going to make a new will, he would hire a very good lawyer that knew how to do that and do it properly, and it would be quite complicated, not something just worked out on a computer. So I didn't find, and I think Carlos Barral felt the same way. It seems really unlikely.
But when you had coaches as a child, your father used to interfere because he thought he knew more than your coaches, right?
Right.
Okay, and so you thought that in matters of his personal wealth, he was just going to leave it in the hands of some expert attorney and not have any input. Is that what you're saying?
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that he knew nothing about computers. Everybody that knows him knows that. So there's no way that he could have been working on that computer. And I found it very hard to believe that he would have left it to my mother, who he felt to be somebody extremely unstable, to be working out his will and the complications of that. I assumed he would hire a lawyer. And I assumed that the new will would come forward from an attorney who said, I have this information, the new will.
Now, when you made contact with Mr. Whitkin, you asked him to look for the will.
No, I didn't. I asked him to retrieve the information, if there was any, from those 3 files. He tried. He said there was nothing there. I asked him to check if there was anything else in the computer, personal information or otherwise, anything other than just, computer stuff. And he did that. He said no, there was nothing in there but just computer, like file language stuff and programs and things of that sort. And so at that point, I told him to erase it in a way that another person could not tell that anyone had been there, and just do that.
But you did ask him to look for a file called will, correct?
I told him the 3 entries that I wanted him to check for first.
And what was one of them will?
Yes.
So you did ask him to look for a will.
No, not a will. And I think when he was here testifying, I think he said that I didn't ask him for a will. He thought it was William. So, I wasn't specifically saying, I'm looking for a will. Can you find it? Is it anywhere in this computer? That wasn't what I was thinking. I knew that those 3 entries had been looked at. I wanted to check them again. There wasn't anything on them like Carlos Barral had said when he checked. And that's what the expert said. So I wanted to make sure there was nothing else in there that was personal before I erased it, so that I could see what Carlos Menendez was going to do the next day.
Now, how is erasing the computer going to trap Carlos Menendez the next day?
Because if it could be erased in a way that he didn't know I was there, and he would not have known that I had flown out, he would just assume the computer was in the state that it was in.
And how was that going to set a trap for him? All he had to do was write over the erasure. What is it? Why would you erase?
Oh, no, the trap was that I would know that there was nothing on it.
Why didn't you just take the computer out of the house at that point?
Because I wanted to see what he was going to do.
Then why didn't you just wait there in the house the next day? Why did you fly back? Why did you fly back to New Jersey so fast?
Because I didn't want him to know that I had been there.
And what did you hope to accomplish from this?
Just to find out what Carlos Menendez was doing going into my mother's computer in the house without telling anybody.
So you flew out to Los Angeles for a 1-day trip, not to get rid of a will which might have disinherited you, but to set a trap for Carlos Menendez. Is that what you're telling us?
Yes.
Now, at the end of that trip, did you talk to your brother on the 31st of August of 1989? Did you talk to your brother about what had transpired?
No.
Did you make any attempts to talk to your brother about what had transpired?
No, I had one of the guards write him a note. Either I wrote a note or I had one of the guards write a note, one or the other. But I left a message for him.
And so the only way that you communicated with your brother between August the 31st and September the 1st is by writing a note which you left with one of the Bel Air patrol guards, correct?
Yes.
And what did you write in the note?
Something to the effect that not to worry that I had been there, even though he didn't know I was in California. I had flown, so not to worry that I had been there, and to just go ahead with whatever Carlos was doing the next day, and not worry about anything that happened with the computer. Basically, I don't remember exactly, but something to that effect.
Now, did you? How did you travel back to the airport? Do you recall?
I think that I hired a car to take me to the airport.
You hired a limousine.
Yes.
Do you remember the name of the company that you hired?
I don't remember.
Your Honor, I have here a document. I'd like to have it marked as Exhibit 251, I think.
252.
Thank you. Showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 252. Does this exhibit refresh your recollection as to the name of the limousine service that you hired to take you to the airport?
Yes, Music Express. I guess the same ones that my dad uses.
All right, and this indicates that you made arrangements to be picked up at, I think it's Methuselah's restaurant, and that you wanted to be taken to Los Angeles Airport. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. And do you remember whether or not there was a telephone inside of the limousine?
I believe so.
Did you make any phone calls?
I think I did.
Now, did your parents have a safe inside of their house?
It would surprise me if they didn't.
They may have had a safe in the house. Not one that, I think it was just a safe brought from like the other houses, not something installed in the wall or anything, but just sort of an empty safe. But I'm not sure. I think we did.
Did you make any inspection of that safe after your parents' deaths?
No, I don't remember the safe too well. I have a memory of a steel safe, but I can't remember too well.
Now, when you went back to Princeton or back to the New Jersey area on August the 31st, did you stay in that area for a continuous period of time, or were you traveling to other places?
Until August 31st?
No, from August the 31st, when you went back back to the New Jersey area, having erased the computer,
Right.
did you stay in Princeton for a while, or did you go other places? Between then and September the 17th, when the police came and talked to you.
I don't really remember.
On September the 17th, do you recall that you had a conversation with the Beverly Hills Police Department at your aunt Terry Buralt's home?
Yes.
And you have a moment, please.
Oh, did you just see that?
Do
Leslie
you
rolled her
remember
eyes.
during that interview being asked if you
Just the look, the body language and the look on Leslie's face with that. And when she asked for a moment, she just goes like completely puts her head back, like, oh my God, this is taking forever, and then rolls her eyes. I'm sorry. I just thought that was so funny. She's so spicy. She's so spicy even when she doesn't say anything. It's so funny.
if your parents had a habit, I'm sorry, page 4, line 26. Do you remember being asked by Detective Zoller or his partner, Detective Lenahan, whether or not your parents had a habit of falling asleep in front of the television set?
Yes.
And do you remember telling him that sometimes they would and sometimes they wouldn't? It would depend on their state of tiredness.
Right.
You remember indicating that if your mother was tired, which you were sure that she was because of the fishing trip, that they might fall asleep. You remember telling him that?
Yeah, I may have.
And do you remember telling him, page 5, line 11, that they would usually hold each other on the couch and sort of lay there with the lights out?
I may have told him that.
Okay, was that something your parents did?
I don't know about hold each other on the couch so much, but they sat there at night sometimes until it got to a certain hour, and then they would move upstairs and finish watching TV or movies in their bedroom.
Now, at the time that your father closed the doors on August the 20th to the den, did he indicate that he was watching a movie?
I believe that he did. I'm pretty sure that he did, but I don't have perfect memory of it. But he said that he was going to finish doing something before he would, he said, go upstairs And I'll be up after I finish the movie, but I'm not positive.
And do you remember also being asked by Detective Zoller or his partner, page 9, line 26, about the identification that your brother had gone back to the house to pick up, and Detective Zoller asked you, know what name the ID was in, and you said Erik would know that. Do you remember that colloquy with Detective Zoller or his partner?
I don't specifically remember it, but I'm sure I said it if it's in there.
All right, and at that time, you were not going to tell Detective Zoller that the license that your brother had was in the name of Donovan Goodrow. Is that correct?
Right.
Do you remember also at page 11, line 21, counsel? Do you remember also telling the detectives that the lights were on in the house pretty much, that it was lit up? Do you remember telling him that?
Right, it was.
Now, I believe you indicated, though, that there was no light on in the den except for the light coming from the television, and that the room that you went into at the front of the house was also dark, correct?
I don't know if I indicated that.
But you indicated the hall, the foyer, the lights were on in the foyer. Is that correct?
The lights were on in the foyer, and I don't remember if the lights were on in the little room. I didn't notice that it was dark necessarily that I remember.
Okay. Did you turn on lights when you and your brother came back and called 911?
No.
All right, so whatever lighting was on in the house at the time that the police got there and searched was the same lighting that existed at the time of your parents' killings. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, unless possibly I turned on my parents' light to use the phone, but I don't remember doing that, so probably it was on.
I believe you indicated that you turned on the lights in the den in order to pick up the shotgun shells. Is that correct?
Yeah, I turned on the lights in the den, but that was not when we made the 911 call.
Right, but when you turned on the lights in the den, did you turn them off then after you had gotten the shotgun shells?
I don't remember. I don't believe so, but I don't remember.
All right. The television set was on during the entire time. Is that correct?
Right.
And in fact, was still on when the police arrived at 11:47 that evening, correct?
Right.
Did you in any way increase the volume of the television set in order to obliterate the sounds of the shotguns?
No.
Now, in talking to Detective Zoller, you had a discussion with him at page 12 about that he asked you, or he said to you, that your aunt mentioned that you felt bad that you didn't go back and check your mother. Had you ever told your aunt, and I take it this is Aunt Terry, had you ever told her that you felt bad that you hadn't gone back to check your mother?
I don't think so, but I may have. I don't know what I was thinking when I made that statement. So.
And then Detective Zoller said to you at line 9, your mother was gone at that time. So if you have any concerns that you could have gone over and saved her by being there just 5 minutes earlier, then you know, and you said, yeah. Do you remember Detective Zoller telling you this?
Not specifically, no.
And so you have no recollection of ever talking to your Aunt Terry about the fact that you felt bad that you couldn't save your mother?
No.
Because
when I got there, she would have assumed that they had already died. So I don't know why I would say that,
But you didn't feel bad about not saving your mother, did you?
Well, that situation really didn't make sense because I just wasn't thinking that way. I mean, I knew what had happened, and it wasn't a situation where I was saving my mother. I was afraid of her, so I don't think I would have made that statement to at least Aunt Terry.
Now, do you also remember telling Detective Zoller at page 14 that the maid normally had Saturdays and Sundays off, correct?
Right.
And at the time that you shot your parents, you were aware of the fact that the maid was not home, right?
Yes.
At page 15, counsel, in speaking to Detective Zoller on the 17th of September of 1989, he asked you if there had been any problems recently between you and your parents. And you said, not really. my mom and I had a sort of a fight the night before.
Right.
Okay. And you were asked what it was about, and you said because she'd locked the door and I forgot a key and had to wake her up to open the door.
Right.
Okay. Now, when in the early part of August of 1989, do you remember that there was a woman there who was house sitting, and I believe you indicated that you talked to her about cooking? Do you remember that
Yes.
lady?
Yes.
Did she ever give you a key to the house during her stay house sitting?
She may have given me a key to the house, but the problem was, I mean, at times I carried a key with me if I could remember, but the problem was that my mother wanted all keys to the house, all the controllers to the gates in the little table drawer in the foyer. And she wanted everything back in there, and you couldn't just keep a key like on a key ring. And so what would happen is, and she rarely locked the doors. So then you just suddenly find yourself where you had not taken a key and the door locked. And that was what the argument was about between us.
But your mother didn't know that Mrs. DeVito had given you a key, did she?
I don't remember if she knew or not.
Okay, so when you talked to Detective Zoller, you told him that the fight that you'd had was about the fact that you'd had to wake your mother up because you'd forgotten your key.
Right.
And you didn't tell him anything else about any of the other fights you'd had during that week, right?
Right.
Now, at page 28, starting at line 11, Detective Zoller asked you the following question. Marzi said that, and let me break here and ask you, did you understand Marzi to be your father's secretary?
Yes.
I would object to this question because multiple hearsay.
All right. Wish to approach. All right.
Mr. Menendez, do you remember Detective Zoller asking you about a fight that you might have had with your mother, not on Saturday night, but on either Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday night before your parents' deaths?
Whether or not he asked me?
Well, do you remember the subject matter coming up in your discussions with Detective Zoller on September the 17th?
I'm not sure. I believe I remember telling him that my mother and I had a fight, but I don't really remember the conversation that well.
Okay, and you told him, page 29, no, I can't remember exactly what night we got in the fight, but whatever night we got in the fight, we talked to her in the morning. And later on, it says at line 22, it opened up into, I started talking about one of my girlfriends. Did you talk to your mother about any of your girlfriends during the week before Thursday night?
No, I didn't have a girlfriend.
Well, but you had girlfriends, correct?
Right.
And you had girlfriends that your parents didn't approve of. Is that correct?
Right.
And after this conversation with Detective Zoller and his partner, he began to ask you about your various girlfriends. Do you remember that he asked you about your girlfriends?
I think so. I think he asked about Christy.
Okay. And do you
And
remember?
maybe Charmaine too, I think.
Okay. And at page 30, line 5, do you remember in discussing your girlfriends, you said the following? No, I thought maybe I had gotten Christy pregnant. I thought for a minute or two, but like I didn't notify my parents till I found out it wasn't true. Do you remember telling Detective Zoller that?
Right.
Okay, now I believe you testified earlier that you told your father before you found out it wasn't true and that he had paid off your girlfriend.
No, ma'am, I didn't say that.
Well, wasn't it your testimony that it was your state of mind that your father had paid Christy so that she could have an abortion?
Right.
And it was your belief that Christy was pregnant and had aborted your child as a result of your father's interference.
Right.
And you told Detective Zoller that you didn't notify your parents until you found out it wasn't true. Not till you found out she was no longer pregnant, but till I found out it wasn't true.
Right. And I'm not sure how much of the truth of what happened there I was relating as far as whether I found out from my dad that it wasn't true because Christy denied it. But I wasn't going to tell Detective Zoller that I felt it was true or that it was true and reflect badly on Christy and on my dad and those things. I'm just, I was not there really voluntarily. They were at the house. They wanted to speak to me. I didn't feel I could just say no to their face. And I just would not have been revealing lots of personal information about me or my parents and of that nature. Not to him anyway.
So even this detail you lied about to the police then, is that correct?
As far as that I knew that it wasn't true, yes.
Now, on October the 31st, when you were called to Dr. Oziel's office, you were at the
I will say that it is damaging that these things do come up. These points where he told the police one thing, but then it was really another thing. And especially when it's things that don't really seem to matter. Like, I understand the whole trying to cover up the crime, and then eventually it all comes out, and then they're being honest about everything. But here, that aspect seems like it's not related to the crime. It almost feels worse. I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me know. Let me know in the chat or in the comments if you're watching on replay.
the house in Beverly Hills. Is that correct? When you received the phone call?
Yes, I was at the house. Yeah.
And how long had you been in Los Angeles as of October the 31st?
Really not sure. I'm not sure.
Would it have been a matter of days or weeks, or do you have any idea?
I don't have any idea, really.
Now, when you arrived there on October the 31st, did you have to wait for a period of time in the waiting room before you went in to see Dr. Oziel?
No.
Did you go straight in?
No, I believe I went in and I pushed the button, and then he came out and brought me in.
Was there anyone else present in the waiting room when you went there that day?
There may have been. I believe that there may have been.
All right. Can you describe this person for me?
I just think there was a lady there.
Do you have a specific recollection?
Not sure. Not sure if it was that day.
Could it have been the November 2nd that you saw this person there?
Possibly. I remember it being the first one, but it could be the second.
And I believe you indicated in your direct examination that you did not trust Dr. Oziel. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. And you knew Dr. Oziel at that point. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And why didn't you trust Dr. Oziel?
From our...
Your Honor, I'm going to object at this point. May I go first?
All right.
Mr. Menendez, why didn't you trust Dr. Oziel?
Because he's a lying liar who
From
lies.
knowing him previously.
And what was it about his conduct with you that made you not, or what was it about him from knowing him previously that made you not trust him?
Everything. His face. His words.
Just knowing his personality.
So it was your state of mind when you went there on October the 31st that you did not trust this man.
Right. Not that he would do the things that he has done, but that this was not a trustworthy person, and this was a person with big ego problem, and just my overall feeling about him from knowing him.
Okay, and it was your impression from your prior contact with him. How many prior contacts had you had with him in terms of hours?
Object to this under 1014, Your Honor.
I don't remember. I think many, but I don't know how many hours.
And when you went into the room that night, you felt then that he was someone you would not want to tell your secrets to. Is that correct?
Yes.
Justified.
And when
in my
you got
opinion.
there, you were very upset with your brother. Is that correct?
Yes.
And in getting upset with your brother, it was apparent, was it not, that you had participated in the killings of your parents, correct?
Yes, I think so.
And you made statements in the presence of Dr. Oziel, which implicated you as a participant in your parents' killings.
No, I did not. Although it is true that it was obvious that I was upset with him, and so I was involved. I assumed he had confessed to him, so I'm sure he knew I was involved. But I wasn't, at least in that session, going to say anything until I knew what they had decided to do.
Until you knew what they had decided to do? Who's
Right.
they? Who's
My
they?
brother and Dr. Oziel had met before I got there, and it was my feeling that they may have decided that my brother and I should turn ourselves in to the police, that my brother had told him what was going on, and that was my concern when I got there, and I just wasn't sure until I heard what they was all about, that what I should do.
Okay, so your state of mind then was that your brother had confessed,
Right.
and that in confessing you were implicated, correct?
Right.
Because that would have been part of the confession, right?
Right.
Okay, and that Dr. Oziel now knew or suspected from your brother's statement that you had killed your parents.
Right.
And you did nothing when you went in there to get him to believe otherwise, right? In other words, you never said it's not true, I didn't do it.
Right. No, I didn't say that. No.
And in fact, everything you said would lead a normal, rational person to believe that you had participated, correct?
Yes.
Now, why was it that you were going to give Dr. Oziel the impression that you participated in the killings of your parents if you didn't trust him?
It wasn't that I was trying to give him the impression. He already knew. My brother had told him, so that wasn't an issue. The issue was what were they going to do? Were they going to turn themselves in? If my brother had made the decision that I'm going to say what happened and turn myself in and see what happens, then I wasn't sure how I felt about that. I had just gotten a phone call and I had just gone over, and I just wasn't sure. So I just didn't want to, he wanted to tell me everything my brother had said to him, and I didn't want to get into anything my brother had said to him until I talked to my brother and I knew what they wanted to do.
So you didn't want your brother to have any further contact with this potential witness until you had met privately with your brother, correct?
Right. I wasn't necessarily thinking it out like that, but that's basically what I was thinking. Yes, I'd like to talk to him first. And preferably if he would just leave right away with me, that would be nice too. But he had obviously gone to Dr. Oziel voluntarily.
Now, at the time that you went there, you were very concerned for your own well-being, correct? In other words, you thought that this might lead to your arrest ultimately, correct?
Yes. Right.
Were you at all concerned about your brother's well-being?
Very much so, because he was suicidal, and that's why he went there. And it's one of the reasons that I participated in the way that I did afterwards in these therapy sessions was partly for my brother. But I really didn't have a feeling that Dr. Oziel was terribly concerned about that. I think he just found the whole thing fascinating.
Well, I
Ooh,
believe
that
you
sounds-
indicated that Dr. Oziel told you on
sounds about
October the
accurate.
31st that he found you personally menacing, correct?
He did, yeah.
All right, so when he testified to that, that actually happened, right? He actually said that to you.
Yes,
Okay, so he was telling the truth about that.
right.
Okay. And when you went in there and found out that Dr. Oziel, a man you didn't trust, now had information which linked you to a crime that some might view as murder, correct?
Well, I don't think I was thinking about what people would think about it, only that I didn't want to have to explain what happened.
Well, the theory in the community up in the first few weeks of the offense, after the offense had occurred, was that this was this could have been an organized crime hit.
I'm going to object to the theory of the community, as you're saying.
Let's rephrase the question.
Were you aware that that was the way that the case had been described in the weeks following your parents' deaths?
Yes, very much so, yes.
You were very much aware of that.
Right.
And that would have been a murder, correct?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for legal conclusion.
Yes,
Right. And so when you went there that day and you saw Dr. Oziel, you didn't know what your brother had said to him, correct?
No.
And I take it you didn't want your brother to have any further conversation with Dr. Oziel until you had spoken with your brother, correct?
That would have preferred it that way. I assumed again that I couldn't just walk in and say, Erik, let's go. I mean, I assumed my brother went to him for some reason.
And you wanted to find out from your brother how much damage had been done by him talking to Dr. Oziel, correct?
Well, I wanted to find out first what if they had decided to do anything about this now, and also from Dr. Oziel, who was obviously the person in control, what he was going to do with it. And so I wanted to find that out. And then I certainly, before I said anything as far as details or got involved in anything, wanted to talk to my brother first so we could decide what we wanted to do.
Now, in expressing your dissatisfaction to your brother, it was during that time that Dr. Oziel said to you that he found you to be personally menacing. Is that correct?
Right.
And at some point, your brother left the room, correct? And you continued on a bit with Dr. Oziel.
Well, just a couple of words as I was leaving to follow my brother, yes.
And did you say to him, good luck, Dr. Oziel?
I didn't. I don't know that I ever said that, but assuming that I said that, it wouldn't have been there. I think that I said goodbye to him in front of the elevators. And, I think I was saying goodbye to him there.
Now, I believe you testified on direct examination that Dr. Oziel explained the confidentiality laws to you. Is that correct?
Right.
And one of the things you say that he said to you is that if you threatened him, that there would be no confidentiality, right?
Right.
But you didn't trust him anyway, confidentiality or not, right?
I didn't trust him, but
Right.
I was
So
hoping he was right. But basically, he was telling me that there was only confidentiality if he didn't feel threatened, and that he basically, it could have been immediately after that he said he was feeling threatened, and said that, I think, more than once.
So he did say to you that he was feeling threatened,
Yes.
and you continued to threaten him, didn't you?
I never threatened him. He said, and he never said that I threatened him. He just said that I seemed menacing to him and that he felt threatened
And
by
so,
that.
and so if in fact you said, good luck, Dr. Oziel, it was in a cheerful tone, correct?
I'm not sure why I would have said good luck. Maybe he's just making that up along with the other things he made up, or maybe I actually said it, but it was certainly not in a threatening way. I would never have done that at that point. There was just no way. I mean, I went there and he immediately explained confidentiality, and that the more threatened.
I mean, he went out and said it. Maybe he's making that up like he made other stuff up, like all the other stuff up. I say it because I personally think Dr. Oziel's testimony was full of shit in so many ways, on so many points, and so many topics, more topics than I feel like we even needed to get into in this trial. But to my mind, his credibility, Dr. Oziel's credibility, was completely destroyed by the defense.
Threatened he felt, or if I made threats at him, it wasn't confidential information. So the last thing I was going to do was give him any impression that could lead to that, if I could help it.
Were you interested in Dr. Oziel not feeling threatened?
Yes, very much so.
All right. And so at that point you said, Dr. Oziel, I'm not a murderer. I killed my parents in self-defense.
No, I wasn't going to say that to him. I wasn't sure if my brother had already said that to him, but I just wasn't going to volunteer it myself for the reasons that I gave. I just wanted to meet with my brother.
That makes sense.
First. And I didn't know if Dr. Oziel was just going to go straight to the police after the session. I thought he very well could, and I told him that he was telling me that he wouldn't, and that there was some confidentiality here. He wasn't sure. He said it was potential, but that regardless, he wasn't going to go to the police. And my feeling was, I don't really trust you. I'm not sure if you're going to go to the police or not. I mean,
The night of your parents' killings, you sent your brother in to talk to Sergeant Edmonds first to make sure that he could keep the story going, correct?
right.
Okay. And you wanted to know what your brother had said before you went in to talk to Sergeant Edmonds.
Right.
Okay. So when you saw Dr. Oziel on October the 31st, you wanted to know what your brother had said, correct? in order to decide what you would say to Dr. Oziel on any possible subsequent occasion, right?
Well, I told him I hadn't decided whether I would talk to him again ever. I just hadn't decided. I mean, I had never planned on having any more sessions of therapy with him from a long time ago. I'd made that decision. Now, this was like the first time I was meeting him again, aside from right after my parents died. And I just wasn't sure.
When you went home that night, did your brother come back to the Beverly Hills house?
My brother left in the Jeep, and he went to the Beverly Hills house, and he was still standing around outside waiting for me when I got home.
What car were you driving at that time?
I was driving the Alfa Romeo.
And when you got home, did you and your brother have any conversation that night as to what he had told Dr. Oziel?
Yes.
What did your brother tell you?
He said that he had gone there because he was thinking of killing himself, and he was very depressed. We talked about, why couldn't he tell me? And he said that I was so unstable. I was just making decisions. So I wanted to play tennis. I wanted to go to school. Maybe I was going to be in business. And that he just felt like he couldn't talk to me, that we were not as close for some reason. He felt distant, and that he was thinking of killing himself. So he went to Dr. Oziel so that Oziel could tell him he was a good person, because he was feeling suicidal and very guilty and confused. So we talked about that for a while, and then I wanted to know what he had actually told him, and he said that he had basically just told him that he didn't know why it happened and given him some details. The only thing I remember he said is that he told him we had purchased guns, and that we were involved, that we did it or something like that.
Did your brother tell you that he had told Dr. Oziel anything about what you did after the crime?
I think that he may have said he told me all the details that he did tell him, that at least he told me details and said, this is what I've told him.
Okay.
One of them was the purchase of the guns, and there were a few other things. And I learned in the next session that he had told him that I had reloaded and shot my mother at some point. I'm not sure what else he had told him. I think the thing with the car.
Pardon me?
I think the going back into the car afterwards also.
To recover evidence?
Right.
And your brother told you that these are some of the details that he told Dr. Oziel when he spoke to him before you got there. Is that correct?
Right.
Did your brother tell you anything about telling Dr. Oziel about planning the crime?
No. He said that Dr. Oziel asked him why it happened and so on, and he just said that he didn't know why. And he told me he told him that because he didn't know what else to tell him, because he didn't want to explain to him what was going on between him and Dad and the whole reason that this happened.
Now, Mr. Menendez, after your parents' deaths, you lied to many people about what had happened, right?
Yes.
Okay. Why couldn't you just tell Dr. Oziel that you were in fear for your life from your parents and make up a lie as to why?
I guess we could have told him that, but I just assumed that if I told him that, we would have to discuss why, and I didn't want to discuss why.
But you could have lied about it. You lied about it for quite a while.
But I never told anybody that and made up a lie as to the reason why. I just never mentioned anything about being involved.
Well, what you actually told Dr. Oziel is that you planned to kill your parents, right?
No, we never mentioned anything around the crime at all. We just kind of talked about what was going on in the family, and essentially I didn't know what he wanted to talk about before I arrived the second time, and he told me what he wanted to talk about. And all my brother and I discussed was, that he had said he had told him he didn't know why, and that I felt relieved that he had said that, and that I didn't want to talk about anything that had happened with Dad and him, and to basically just not tell this guy all kinds of family, all the things that had happened, and let's just try and, our main concern is to get him to relax, this was after we decided to go back. First, we decided whether or not we should even go back. But since he was feeling threatened and he said there was no confidentiality, and I told my brother, I really think he's going to go to the police. So let's see if we can get him to relax and feel comfortable.
And one of the things that would have made him relax and feel comfortable was the notion that you had killed in self-defense and not in any kind of premeditated way, right?
Objection, Your Honor, that calls for speculation.
True. What?
I think that would have made him
should have
feel
been.
a lot more comfortable. And it's possible that my brother even suggested that, but I'm not positive. But I was very adamant that I did not want to discuss the reasons why this happened. I did not want to tell anybody, especially somebody like this, my father's problems to that extent and the family's problems and all about my mother. And I just was not going to get into those things. I'm a very personal person.
Well, you didn't know what Dr. Oziel knew about your family on October the 31st, right?
Well, no, I had a good sense. He knew very little, but, just met my dad once, I think, and maybe my mom a few times.
Did your brother ever tell you that he had told Dr. Oziel that he had procured false identification in order to purchase the shotguns?
I don't remember if he did or not. He may have.
Did your brother ever tell you that the reason that he told Dr. Oziel the reason that that your mother was killed is because she would be a witness and she was miserable anyway? Did he ever tell you that?
No, obviously, he wouldn't have told him that, but I really don't remember exactly. The sense I got from the conversation is that he had told him basically no details, nothing that could, nothing personal, nothing about the issues in the family and the problems and the crisis itself. And that was basically all I was concerned about. And I said, okay, we'll just go in and see what he wants.
Your Honor, may we approach, please?
All right. We'll be taking our recess in a moment. Before I let you folks go, regarding tomorrow's schedule, we'll want both juries here tomorrow at 9:00.
Okay. So I think we can sufficiently or safely cut it off there. All right. This was another good one, another very interesting one. There was a lot of kind of sludge for me personally towards the end. I would say like the last third. I don't know how you guys felt about it, but let me finish this poll and the poll. Okay. The question was, do you think Lyle had a sincere belief his life was in danger on the night he killed his parents? 69% said yes. 30% said no. I think that that 1% that disappeared into the ether probably has something to do with the number of votes. Anyway, so there were 170 votes in that. Interesting. Very, very interesting. So, okay. And let me double check right here to make sure I don't have any questions here. Okay. There are a couple questions before we go. From Draco Amy, question is Pam just getting lost in the weeds or too close to the case here, or is she just bad at this? I don't know. I would hesitate before saying that she's just bad at this, unless I see her in some other case where she's doing the same thing. I don't know. She's not on the level of Elaine. So I don't know. To me, there's a lot of similarity between getting lost in the weeds and getting too close to the case. Cause I feel like when you get too close to the case, you very much get lost in the weeds. I think she might be, she might just be, trying to go for everything everywhere all at once. Right. And that it doesn't necessarily help if you're not already on board with her at this point. Everything is kind of an issue at this point. She's trying to make points towards, that go towards all of the elements that the prosecution, that the state has to prove. And that's fine. but it does kind of have that feeling of, when everything is important, nothing is important. You know what I mean? So yeah, I don't know. Dater, are they considered to be handsome for this period of time? Does it help, or do you know them, or do you get to know them too much, like how you can get blind to how your friends look because you know them too well? I think they're considered pretty handsome. I mean, for this time period, I don't know what for this time period, but I would say, yeah, I would say they're fairly handsome. And I think it would probably help them. Usually I don't know, I feel like there's often articles and stuff that are written from data about how the more attractive someone is, the more likely they are to get be chosen to get a job, or have people come in favor of them on something, or to get elected, at least in the United States. I don't know. I feel like, for elected positions, it's helpful to be attractive, like physically attractive. Con artists, it helps to be attractive. I don't know. I feel like things are generally helped by someone being attractive rather than being hurt. I mean, unless we're talking about some very specific, very specific charges that have to do with attraction. So yeah, I think that's all the questions that we've got. And yeah, serial killers. It's helpful for them to be attractive to do what they do the worst. Okay. So that for me about does it. I will take the indie cam off screen because she's snoozing on the floor. Thank you so much for joining me today, guys. This was another great episode of Menendez Mondays of Classic Trials. We are one more bit of testimony through this case. We've been through so much time with Lyle on the stand. I don't know how much longer we've got. Something tells me it's not going to be too much longer. I mean, this was part 8 of his testimony. So, but otherwise, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you to everybody that is watching. Thank you to everybody that watched live, that watched on replay. Thank you to everyone in the chat. Thank you to everyone commenting and liking and super chatting. We got some very generous super chats, and of course some very generous gifted memberships to folks. Thank you so much. And last but not least, of course, always thank you so much to the mods for helping to guide the discussion, because we've got a lot of different opinions in this case, of course, and people disagree in so many ways and on so many points in here. My opinion is obviously not the only one that matters here. There are so many different opinions here that are just so fascinating for me to see how people differ on various points. And otherwise, I hope you guys have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your Monday, whatever is left of it. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. For those who are members, we will have the members only live stream on Friday. So yeah, and in between then, I'm hoping to get a video uploaded before Friday. That's what I'm hoping for. Fingers crossed. We shall see. Okay. Otherwise, that for me about does it. And I will see you guys. I'll see you guys in the next video. See ya.